Hey guys, tonight we slip into a winter darker than your blackout curtains and colder than your ex's heart. Welcome to a medieval village where snowflakes don't sparkle, they sneak under your door and bite. You wake up in a one-room hut that smells like damp wool, turnips, and mild regret. Your blanket is a scratchy wool thing, probably older than you and your bed. Just straw mashed into the shape of your back over the last few weeks. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, it's only late November. The frost creeps in through every surface like a nosy neighbor with a key. The walls around you are made of wattle and daub, a generous term for sticks smeared with mud and hope. And you can hear the wind whistle through the gaps like it's gossiping about how unprepared you are for this season. Your breath fogs in the air, and if you stuck your hand out from under the blanket, you're pretty sure it would come back frostbitten and slightly offended. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your day starts the way most of them do, by not dying of cold overnight. Victory! You sit up slowly, trying not to disturb the delicate thermal ecosystem you've created beneath your blanket. Every motion leaks warmth. Every breath feels like rationing air inside a cave. You consider staying horizontal, but then your stomach growls and you remember there's cold turnip soup waiting. Motivation unlocked. Outside, frost coats the ground like some petty deity has been painting the earth with frozen spite. Smoke curls from chimneys, those lucky enough to have functioning ones anyway, and the morning air smells like burnt straw and boiled onions. You shuffle to the door, careful not to slip on the icy dirt floor, and push it open with a reluctant creak. The village is barely awake. A few early risers tend to animals. One neighbor coughs behind a scarf, and you silently hope it's just from the cold and not something contagious. Again, you're not ready for another visit from Death's traveling theater troupe. The cold is not just outside, it's in your bones. You've been chilled for so long that you're starting to think this is just your baseline temperature now. Historians still argue whether early medieval Europe experienced a mini ice age during these centuries. But you're living proof that winter definitely didn't hold back. Still, you're not completely helpless. You've picked up a few tricks. You sleep with a stone heated by the fire tucked near your feet. You press your body against anyone who doesn't complain. And you learn the hard way that breathing under your blanket traps heat, but also makes your face a little swampy. At night, you huddle close with family, maybe even a goat. Not for emotional comfort, though that's a bonus, but for warmth. Everybody is a radiator in this age. The concept of personal space hasn't been invented yet, probably because if it had, everyone would have frozen to death in it. You think back to last night. You were the one chosen to stay half awake and keep the fire from dying. Not the most glamorous job, but you've learned how to rake the coals just enough to preserve them till morning. They glow faintly now, the heart of the home, barely alive like an old cat refusing to give up. You feed it twigs, whisper encouragement, and hope it bursts into proper flame again before frost creeps too close. Inside the walls are adorned with dried herbs, small charms, and tools. You'd think the decor would lean festive during the winter season, but no. This is strictly survival mode. The one piece of decoration, a bundle of garlic above the door. Part pest control, part superstition. People swear it keeps out both rats and restless spirits. You haven't tested either. The daily rhythm in this cold is slow. You don't rush. That wastes energy. You move deliberately like someone who knows they only have 10 warm movements in them per day, and you're not wasting one on unnecessary excitement. A strange detail most don't realize: your eyes hurt from winter too. Not just the cold, but the brightness. Snow reflects every sliver of daylight, like it's trying to blind you with purity. In some villages, people even made crude sunglasses, strips of bone or wood with thin slits to reduce glare. Fringe historians suggest some early northern folk figured this out way before it became stylish. Today, you're supposed to help gather more fuel, not wood. It's too scarce. Instead, you'll be collecting peat, which is a fancy term for partially decomposed plant matter. Fancy way of saying wet, frozen dirt that sometimes burns. Lucky you. You remember slipping last week and falling straight into a patch. The cold went through you like a debt collector. Before you leave, you add a new patch to your leggings, another layer stitched onto last week's repair job. You're basically a wearable quilt at this point. Each thread has its own personality. Each stain has a story, usually involving mud and mild swearing. And as you step outside layering scarf over scarf, you remind yourself of the one rule that gets you through each winter day movement equals life. Keep walking. Keep collecting. Keep breathing mist into the air like a ghost rehearsing for a haunting. And if your toes are still wiggling by sunset, that's a win. You step outside into a world that isn't just cold, it's personally offended you exist. The wind greets you like an unpaid landlord, hissing through every seam in your clothing and reminding you that nature doesn't care about your feelings. You tug your cloak tighter around your shoulders, though calling it a cloak is generous. It's more like a patchwork blanket with ambitions. The path to the woodpile is half frozen mud, half ice, and entirely miserable. You sidestep a puddle that looks like it's been waiting all morning just to freeze around your foot. The sun, what little there is of it, filters through a gray sky like it's also tired of trying. You pass a neighbor who offers a weak nod and a muffled morning voice half lost in their scarf. Their breath curls into the air like a spirit escaping. The truth is, your house isn't built to keep winter out. It's more like winter's favorite hangout spot. The walls, wattle and daubed, thatched over with straw, are about as effective as wrapping yourself in slightly wet newspaper. Historians politely call this construction technique vernacular architecture. What they really mean is whatever was lying around at the time. sticks, mud, dung. That's the holy trinity of your home structure. Inside, you can see daylight through the gaps in the walls if you squint in the right places. You've stuffed the holes with rags, moss, old wool, and once questionably some feathers from a chicken who looked surprised when it woke up lighter than it went to bed. Still, no matter what you plug the gaps with, the wind finds new ones. You're pretty sure the wind has a grudge. It whistles through at night, tugging at your blankets, chilling your fingers, even when they're tucked into your sleeves. Sometimes it makes noises that sound suspiciously like words. You tell yourself it's just your imagination, but your grandmother swears the wind carries voices from the dead. That's comforting. There's no insulation, no window glass. The windows are holes, sometimes covered in oiled cloth, sometimes with thin leather or even animal bladders stretched and dried like budget parchment. It lets in light and also every emotion the weather has that day. You glance at your roof. It's thatched, of course, beautiful in spring, horrifying in winter. Snow piles up on it like a cruel joke, soaking in and dripping through if the wind shifts just right. The thatch moves in breezes, whispering to itself like a fussy ant. You've patched it with extra straw and a few old cloaks, but there's still one corner that drips right onto your sleeping mat if you don't place a bucket beneath it. Remember that cold you picked up last week? It started with that drip, landed square on your nose while you were asleep. You woke up sneezing so hard you nearly bit your tongue. Historians still argue whether medieval homes were intentionally designed this poorly, or if they just had very low expectations. The consensus: people did the best with what they had, and what they had was not enough. You finally reached the wood pile, though pile is a strong word. It's more of a carefully rationed cluster of hope. Firewood is precious. Trees aren't exactly in abundance near your village, and cutting them down is dangerous, time-consuming, and often illegal if they belong to the local lord. That's why your bundle of sticks looks like a handful of twigs held together by optimism. Most of your firewood isn't wood at all. It's peat, dried dung, bundled brush, and whatever else burns long enough to make your fingers tingle again. You collect it like treasure, dragging it back to the hut like some frost-bitten golem murmuring precious under your breath. The fire itself is more than just warmth. It's life. Without it, the cold would crawl in, fully stretch itself across the floor like a lazy cat and never leave. You remember stories told around the hearth of families who let the fire go out overnight and woke up with blue lips and a silence so thick it never left the room again. You get back inside shaking snow from your boots. The fire is still smoldering, a good sign. You bank it gently, feeding it a little more fuel. You don't want it flaring too fast, just a steady burn, something to stretch through the long afternoon. You sit for a moment, rubbing your hands together. The warmth spreads slowly like tea through cloth. You pull your stool closer to the hearth and let your face thaw bit by bit. It stings a little, that first return of feeling, like your skin is waking up and it's not happy about it. You sip broth from a wooden bowl. It tastes like onions, mystery root vegetables, and a memory of salt. Still, it's warm. and that's what matters. You lean your head back against the wall, letting the flicker of the fire reflect in your half-lidded eyes. For a few minutes, you don't think about the wind outside. You don't think about the bucket slowly filling with water from the leaking roof. You don't even mind that the goat has moved closer again, sniffing your foot for possible food. You just breathe. The cold will return. The wind will slip through the seams. But for now, for this breath, this moment, you're still here. The ground beneath you is not just cold, it's an accomplice. Every inch of that frozen earth beneath your straw bedding seems to have taken a personal vow to siphon away what little warmth your body manages to produce. You've tried everything, layers of straw, folded rags, even a broken wooden crate once all stacked between you and the dirt like offerings to some ancient frost god. But still, the chill seeps in. You shuffle across the floor, careful not to trip over the sleeping goat again. It snores like a very tiny offended dragon and does not take kindly to being disturbed. Not that you blame it. It's cold even for a creature wearing a built-in wool sweater. The dirt floor itself is unforgiving. No boards, no tiles, just frozen mud cracked in places from the shifting cold damp in others, from the condensation that clings to every surface like guilt. Drop something on it at night, and it might freeze to the ground before you can even pick it up again. You've lost a spoon that way. You suspect it's still down there quietly becoming an archaeological discovery. But here's the thing, you've learned to use the earth against itself. One trick passed down from someone's great-great-grandmother involves layering thick mats of woven reeds and straw, then putting a woolen mat or animal skin over top anything to slow the icy creep. It's not luxury, but it's the difference between shivering awake every hour and almost sleeping through the night. That floor doesn't just challenge your warmth, it also threatens your health. Cold rising from the ground has a way of settling into your joints, your lungs, your soul. You're not entirely convinced you've been warm since autumn. Your knees creak, your breath catches, and your fingers go numb at the tips by mid-morning. Congratulations, you're 30 and feel 80. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were chronically ill due to poor conditions, or whether they developed greater tolerance to suffering because they had no other option. Either way, you're not feeling especially blessed. You remember hearing about Roman houses, underfloor heating, actual floors. Your mind paints a fantasy warm stone beneath your feet, not straw hiding a layer of betrayal. You shake the thought off. That was ancient luxury. This is now, and your now is crunchy straw and hope. Still, you try to make it bearable. You rearrange your straw bedding daily, patting it flat again, shifting any damp pieces to the fire for drying, assuming the fire's up to it. You sometimes mix in dried herbs, lavender, if you're lucky, wormwood, if you're desperate. They help mask the goat smell, which, despite your fondness for your furry roommate, is significant. Once your uncle swore that sleeping on dried nettles warmed the body. You tried it. You're still not sure if the warmth came from the plant oils or from your own skin screaming in protest. Either way, you'll never try that again. There's also the matter of sleeping positions. You've learned to tuck your limbs close, knees to chest, arms tight, minimizing the amount of you exposed to the air. Your sibling does the same, and in a crowded hut, the pile of sleeping bodies is less a family scene and more a desperate human lasagna, each layer hoping to leak some warmth from the others. At night, you dream of feathers, not angels' quilts, great fluffy ridiculous pillows and duvets stuffed with goose down and stitched with silk. You've never seen one in real life, but you once heard a traveling merchant describe them, and it stuck in your mind like fairy dust. The thought of softness, warmth that doesn't demand anything in return, it's practically scandalous. You remember when your cousin visited from a slightly wealthier village. She had wooden planks on her floor, actual raised wood. You wanted to cry from jealousy. She talked about how her father had insulated the base with moss and dried leaves, and you thought, so some people just choose not to die slowly. Your own village has tried improvements over time. Someone once suggested lining the floor with ash after a fire said it helped retain heat. You tried it. It mostly made everything black and slightly ashy, including your foot, which you briefly believed had frostbite before realizing you just stepped in last night's cinders. But it's not all suffering. Okay, it's mostly suffering, but not entirely. There are moments, tiny blink and you'll miss it moments, when you sit by the hearth and the floor actually feels warm for a heartbeat. When the straw holds your shape just right and the firelight flickers on the walls like you're inside a story instead of a hut. Moments when you almost forget you're one poorly banked ember away from becoming an icicle in a nightcap. So, you press your palm to the floor briefly before standing. It's cold. Of course it's cold. But you're still here. The straw hasn't frozen. The goat hasn't eaten your socks again. And that weird ache in your ankle is just an ache, not a sign of impending doom. Probably. You step carefully, flexing your feet inside their layered rags. One more layer today, just one more. It might be the one that keeps the cold out, or at least delays it long enough to make it to spring. You tell yourself the same thing your grandfather always said, usually while sneezing into a handful of hay. The ground may be frozen, but you're not buried yet. The fire, when it's behaving, is the beating heart of your home, albeit a heart with mood swings and a tendency to smoke like a nervous teenager. You crouch beside the hearth, coaxing the embers into something resembling a flame. It's a delicate dance. Add too much kindling too fast, and you smother it too little, and it sulks glowing, but refusing to burn. You blow gently, lips pursed, watching the glow pulse in response. It's almost affectionate. Almost. You nudge it with a twig like you're trying to motivate a lazy cat. Finally, with a few encouraging sparks and the help of your last sliver of pine, it catches. You exhale in victory. Another round won in the ongoing war against freezing solid in your sleep. The fire isn't just about warmth. It's your kitchen, your lighting, your entertainment system, and your only form of spiritual therapy. After a long day of being cold and itchy, people in your village can sit and stare at the flames for hours, trading stories, offering gossip, or sometimes just soaking in the quiet crackle, like it's telling them secrets. You remember, your grandmother once said, "Fire is a jealous friend. It loves you when you feed it, but turns on you the moment you forget it." And she wasn't wrong. Let it die overnight, and you're in trouble. Restarting it without coals is misery incarnate. Flint and steel are helpful if you've got them. If not, you're down to rubbing sticks together like a particularly sad caveman. You've heard of people in other villages carrying embers and small clay pots when traveling, wrapped in moss and wool to keep the heat. Tiny portable hearths, warmth on the go. You tried it once. The moss caught fire, the wool smoked up the hut, and you learned that some innovations are better left to those with fewer flammable walls. Your family takes turns tending the fire at night. It's not an official schedule, more like whoever wakes up first and can't feel their toes gets up and pokes the coals. You've had entire conversations in the dark, sleep-slurred and firelit, with someone curled in the opposite corner, half awake and muttering about needing more birch bark. Banking the fire is an art form. You can't just toss logs on and hope. That's how you waste wood and invite smoke into your lungs. No, you pile ashes carefully over glowing coals, add 1 or 2 slow-burning chunks, and pray it stays alive under its gray blanket till dawn. If you do it right, you'll wake to a faint orange glow. If not, you're building a fire from scratch at 4 a.m. with frozen fingers and a bad attitude. Historians still debate how widespread fire banking was among medieval peasants. Some claim it was a common skill passed down like heirloom recipes and ear infections. Others argue it was rare and more likely used in better-off households. You don't care about the academic squabbles, you just care about not waking up with ice on your eyebrows. The fire gives more than heat. It gives smell. Your clothes soak in the scent of wood smoke, which honestly helps cover the other smells you accumulate. There's a kind of social contract in your village. Nobody mentions the smell as long as nobody stops tending the fire. The smoke curls lazily up toward the ceiling, escaping through the thatch and whatever hole you've managed to not patch yet. Some days it hangs in the air longer, especially if it's foggy out. That's when your eyes water and your lungs start to feel like you've been breathing through a mitten. But again, warmth, the eternal trade-off. As the fire settles into a reliable burn, you shift your stool back a few inches. Too close, and your knees start to feel like dry bread cracking. Too far, and your nose turns redder than the berries the birds have already picked clean. You've learned to rotate, turning slowly so every side of you gets a turn by the flames. Your right shoulder is always colder than your left for some reason. It's become your personal weather vane. You joke about it with your sibling. When the shoulder starts to shiver, we've got 3 minutes to soup. Tonight, you'll try to dry out your socks by hanging them on a stick nearby. The trick is placing them close enough to warm far enough not to catch fire. You've scorched more socks than you care to admit. Once your uncle set an entire sleeve ablaze because he fell asleep too close to the hearth. He was fine. His dignity less so. There's something oddly meditative about fire tending. You get lost in it. Feed, watch, adjust, repeat. It's like having a pet that demands endless snacks but doesn't bark. Or a toddler, except it won't cry, just slowly let you freeze if ignored. Your mind drifts to warmer places, imaginary feasts in castles, bards singing in heated halls with roaring hearts. You picture wrapping your hands around a pewter mug of mulled wine, even though you've never had wine that wasn't bitter and suspiciously gritty. Still, fantasy helps. And just when the warmth starts to sink into your skin, a draft snakes across the floor and licks at your ankles. You groan. Time to patch that crack near the door again. That wind has no chill about boundaries. So you rise, knees cracking, and shuffle over with a fresh scrap of cloth, stuffing it into the space where the outside tries to become inside. You sigh. The fire is alive. The wind has been temporarily evicted. The socks are only mildly smoldering. You sit again. The hearth glows orange, soft and steady. For a moment, it almost feels like you're winning. You're barely seated again when the realization hits you. It's your night to bank the fire. Again. You try to pretend you didn't hear the sigh of relief from your sister as she slinks into the straw pile and wraps herself in the collective family blanket, an itchy thing that smells like cabbage and persistence. So you stay up, eyes half closed, the fire your only company. It spits and crackles softly, tossing tiny sparks like they're trying to tell you secrets. You keep a stick nearby for poking and another for fending off the occasional curious chicken. Yes, sometimes the chickens sneak inside. Warmth is the ultimate motivator. The banking process is delicate. First, you gather some ashes, not too much, just enough to create a soft cocoon over the embers. Then comes the peat. It's not glamorous, but it burns slow and holds heat like a grumpy old man refusing to leave a tavern. You lay it down gently, covering the coals with the same reverence a baker might use to tuck dough under a cloth. Then you whisper a small, not quite serious prayer to St. Bridget, patron saint of hearths. Your mother says it helps. You're not convinced, but hey, can't hurt, right? As the flames fade into a slow smolder, the hut dims shadows, growing longer, gentler. Your ears start to fill with the sounds of winter night, distant hoots, the low murmurs of sleeping livestock, the occasional creak of timber as the roof adjusts to the frost. It's quiet, but never silent. The cold hums always. You glance over to where the rest of the family sleeps. Your father snores gently, one foot sticking out from the blanket like he's tempting fate. The baby is bundled so tightly in wool, you're not entirely sure where she ends, and the wrappings begin. The goat, of course, has migrated close to the fire and looks at you with a smug, sleepy expression. You envy them for a moment. You're tired, so tired, but this job isn't just tradition. It's survival. If the fire dies, the hut goes cold. If the hut goes cold, someone wakes up coughing. And if the coughing starts, well, everyone knows how that ends. You've seen enough to know. Historians still argue whether fire banking was passed down through formal instruction or sheer desperation. In your case, it was both. You learned by doing and by watching your older cousin accidentally snuff the hearth and earn a week of cold meals and colder shoulders. A tiny ember winks at you fading beneath its ash blanket. You nudge it, coaxing it back to life. Not tonight, little flame. We're making it till morning. And yet, for all its importance, fire isn't a cure-all. Your breath still fogs before your face. The air, though warmed, holds the dampness of your packed earth floor and the clinging chill of old stones. Your toes wrapped in multiple socks and an extra strip of cloth you stole from your brother's old tunic still feel like they're auditioning for frostbite. You dream of boots, sometimes real ones, leather lined with fur, thick soles that would laugh at snow and stomp away drafts. Instead, you wear wooden clogs with straw stuffed inside and try not to think too much about the blisters. Somewhere out there, you're sure rich folks have servants whose entire job is to keep their fires going. You try to imagine that being paid to nap near heat. You'd apply for that job in a heartbeat, assuming there was an opening and a strong recommendation from someone with clean hands. You shift slightly careful not to wake anyone and wrap your shawl tighter. The fire's glow pulses steadily, and with the coals banked safely, you allow yourself to lean back. Just for a moment, just until your eyelids stop aching, but sleep comes in flickers. The moment you close your eyes, your mind flings you into a dream where the fire has gone out and the wind howls through a broken door. You snap awake, heart pounding, only to find the coals still glowing, the room still quiet. This is what winter does. It makes you suspicious of peace. Another hour passes. You tend the fire again, add one last dry twig, rearrange the ash blanket, check your family, all still breathing, all still here. And finally, the sky outside begins to pale just barely. The rooster outside doesn't even bother to crow. Too cold. But you know, you made it. You poke the coals once more and whisper, "Good job," like it's a teammate. Then you rise, slowly, stretch even slower, and make your way to the straw bedding that's been calling your name for hours. You curl in back against your brother's blanket, pulled high, and let your eyes fall closed. For just a little while you'll sleep. You've earned it, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll dream of something warm, like a feast, or a castle hearth, or socks that don't smell faintly of goat. You don't stay asleep long. A strange sound wakes you, a rustle, a low murmur, then a clatter of something near the doorway. Your eyes flutter open, and for a half second, you're sure it's some night spirit come to drag you into the frost. But no, it's just your cousin tripping over the firewood pile and whisper cursing in a way that could still get him exorcised if the priest were here. You groan, roll over, and realize the fire's still glowing. Faint, but there. Good. And yet you also notice something's changed. The goat is missing. Again. This is not unusual. In winter, it's common practice for families to bring their animals indoors. It's not because you've grown overly sentimental or want to knit matching sweaters. No, this is purely about survival. Livestock equals warmth and food, and a slightly higher chance you'll still be alive by spring. Your goat, like many goats, doesn't appreciate its role as a living radiator. It escapes, frequently, and when it does, It usually heads straight for the neighbor's turnip stash or someone's still warm bedding. You stumble toward the door, pulling your shawl tighter. The cold outside hits your face like a wet slap from the Grim Reaper himself. You mutter something that sounds like a prayer, but could also be a low-level curse and shuffle around the house. There it is, your goat, standing proudly on top of the woodpile, chewing on what might once have been your mittens. You stare at it. It stares back, utterly unrepentant. You lead it back in with the last slice of stale bread and a tone that suggests this is not the first time you've had this conversation. Once inside, it immediately curls beside the fire like it pays rent. But you're not just mad, you're grateful, because that goat, annoying as it is body heat. It's one more warm form pressed into the shared huddle. On nights when the fire falters, a living, bleeding hot water bottle can make all the difference. It's not just goats. Pigs are better rounder, warmer, and less prone to escape. Chickens, questionable. They're twitchy, don't cuddle well, and tend to leave gifts wherever they go. Still, you take what you can get. You've seen entire families sleep lined up alongside their livestock like a bizarre bedtime parade. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was. Some suggest it was limited to the poorest households. Others argue it was so normal it wasn't even mentioned in records like breathing or complaining about the cold. But folk tales remember it. They speak of children sleeping with piglets of cows lowing softly as they shared a roof with humans of geese who honk themselves into exile after getting too cozy by the fire. It's not glamorous, but it works. Body heat is body heat. The animals don't complain much unless they get rolled on, and most of them seem to understand that sleeping indoors means they're less likely to vanish in the night, whether to wolves or neighbors. There's a kind of rhythm to it. You shuffle into bed, someone else shifts over to make room. The cow lets out a long, judgy breath, and the chicken on the rafters drops a feather onto your face right as you're drifting off. You wipe it away, grumble, and accept it as part of life. Your aunt once tried to ban animals from the sleeping area, said it was unclean, disruptive, and unholy. She lasted 2 nights. On the third, after waking up with ice on her eyebrows and a child coughing like a haunted bellows, she opened the door and practically begged the pig to come back. Some say the proximity to animals made people sick. Others argue it kept them alive. The truth, you suspect, lies somewhere in between. You're no doctor, but you know this when you're buried in hay, wrapped in rags, and a goat's butt is pressed against your knees. You sleep warmer. The downside, of course, is the smell. It's complex. You've stopped noticing most of it, but when the traveling priest visits, he always blesses the air before he steps inside, just in case. You understand? Sometimes you want to bless the air yourself, or burn it. Depends on the goat. You crawl back into your sleeping space, now reshaped by the goat's return. It sighs dramatically. You do too. The fire is still holding, and you curl up again this time, with a goat at your back and a sibling kicking you in their sleep from the other side. Cozy in a way that only people with zero personal space can understand. You wrap your scarf around your face and tug the blanket up to your ears. There's a rustle in the hay, someone settling in deeper, probably nudging a chicken aside. The air smells like smoke and wool and livestock. Outside, the wind picks up, howling through the village like it's looking for someone who forgot to shut the door. But not in here. In here, you're a mismatched pile of limbs, animals, and layers defying the cold one collective breath at a time. You let your eyes close again, and this time sleep comes quicker. Warmth pools where your back meets the goat, where your feet find another's. In this strange shared cocoon of heat and snores and quiet, scratchy comfort, you feel something almost like peace. Just don't roll over too fast. That chicken on the rafters is a terrible sleeper. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it barges in like an unwelcome guest, loud, gray, and noticeably colder than it was a few hours ago. The fire's banked embers are still warm, but the air has turned biting again. You unwrap yourself from your sleep tangle, carefully detangling your foot from someone's elbow and nudging the goat who is now firmly convinced your straw bed belongs to it. As you stretch, your joints crack like kindling. You glance down at your feet, still there, still attached, still just a few shades short of frost. Success. Now comes the real challenge, leaving the warmth of the sleeping pile and walking barefoot across the freezing floor to stoke the fire. You curse softly under your breath as your toes meet the packed earth. The cold seeps up instantly, a ruthless reminder that you live a few degrees above survival. You add more fuel to the fire and crouch there, hands spread like wings soaking in what little heat it offers. Then comes the daily ritual, your attempt to create footwear out of whatever's on hand. Boots for you and your fellow peasants are more fantasy than fact. Real boots, leather-lined, maybe even stitched by someone who didn't hate you, are for knights, clergy, and merchants who don't walk in muck. What you've got are wooden clogs, not fancy clogs. These are chunks of wood roughly shaped to resemble shoes, hollowed out enough for your foot to fit, if not comfortably, then at least without injury most of the time. To make them wearable, you stuff your feet with layers of cloth, old rags, worn out undergarments, anything remotely soft. Some folks even use straw, but it pokes. This morning, you repurpose a torn tunic sleeve and an unraveling bit of linen as makeshift socks. You wrap your feet like you're trying to mummify them, and then wedge them into the clogs with a grunt. Elegant, no effective barely. But in winter, your only real footwear strategy is layer until it stops hurting. Historians still argue how much footwear peasants actually had during the colder months. Some say people just went barefoot indoors and used clogs or wrapped shoes only when they had to venture out. Others believe most peasants crafted their own crude versions of boots with hide cloth or even layered bark. Either way, the consensus is clear. Unless you were important or wealthy, your feet were cold. Always. You step outside your soles, already regretting the decision. The path is frozen solid, the snow packed down by dozens of similarly reluctant feet. You walk with the gait of someone trying not to snap in half. Each footfall is a negotiation between traction and dignity. You pass the neighbor's hut, smoke curling from the roof, a sign that their fire made it through the night too. A good sign. The village may be poor, but it watches out for its own. If a chimney doesn't smoke by sunrise, someone checks in. Quiet knocks, muffled greetings. Everyone pretending they're just being neighborly, but everyone knows they're making sure no one froze. You make your way toward the communal well. The bucket's frozen in place, of course. You mutter and begin chipping at the rim with a small piece of stone someone conveniently left nearby. The whole process takes 5 minutes and half your patience. The water once finally hauled up is colder than your expectations for today. With the water sloshing in a cracked pail, you trudge back toward home, where you'll heat a little of it for tea. Not fancy tea, not even herbal, just boiled water with maybe a hint of onion skin or dried something dropped in for flavor. You don't drink it for taste, you drink it because it's hot. Back inside the hut smells faintly better. Someone started porridge. It's mostly oats and water thickened with what might be barley or sawdust. You don't ask. You eat. A bowl is handed to you, warm, slightly chipped and familiar. You cradle it in both hands like a gift. The steam curls up into your face, thawing your nose and reminding you of one essential truth: hot food is better than no food. And it's way better than being warm and hungry because, let's be honest, that combo doesn't exist in your world. You settle near the hearth, letting the steam fog your eyelashes as you eat. The fire is doing its best. So are you. Your father shuffles by in his own clogs, muttering about patching the roof. You offer to help, mostly to escape the sound of the goat chewing loudly near your bedding. Outside again, you balance on the wooden slats and frozen ground, helping lift bundles of thatch and patch holes where the snow has crept in. Your fingers turn red with effort. The wind laughs. But you keep working, because if the roof fails, the cold wins. And you're not letting that happen this week. As you work, your mind wanders, imagining real boots, fur-lined cloaks, maybe even mittens that match. You picture a pair of shoes that don't squeak when wet or squish when stuffed with cloth. You imagine putting them on and walking across a floor that doesn't crunch toward a fire that never goes out. You allow yourself the fantasy because, without it, you'd start counting your remaining toes like coins. By mid-morning, your hands are stiff, your feet are damp, and the roof is slightly less leaky. You go inside, peel off your outermost scarf, and hang it near the fire. The smell of wet wool is now your signature scent. You don't even notice it anymore. You kick off your clogs with a dull thunk, curl back into your corner of the hut, and exhale into your hands. The warmth lingers in your palms. You close your eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, it feels like you're not losing the battle today. You don't mean to drift off again, but your body has its own agenda. One moment you're sitting by the hearth, drying your scarf, and the next, your head jerks forward the kind of half nap that feels longer than it actually is. The fire pops, startling you back to life. A tiny ember leaps onto the stone lip of the hearth before fizzling out like a tiny, angry ghost. You stand, Shake the stiffness from your legs and decide to check the bedding before tonight. The straw mat you sleep on has shifted again. Sleeping on straw sounds almost romantic if you've never done it. But here's the truth: it pokes, it crunches, and it never ever stays in place. It also collects things, dust crumbs, maybe a beetle or two. Last week, you found a spoon in there you hadn't seen in months. Victory! But it's not just for comfort. That straw is your last line of defense against the floor's creeping cold. No medieval peasant worth their salt sleeps directly on dirt unless they're unconscious or lost a bet. So, you fluff the straw trying to rearrange it into something less hostile. You pull a few dry stalks from a bag hanging in the corner, a fresh batch from late summer, saved for nights like this. Over time, you've developed a technique: thickest straw at the bottom woven mat, in the middle rags on top. It's not soft, but it holds warmth for a while. You've even sewn together a few layers of old linen to form something that kind of resembles a mattress. Your cousin calls it the nest. You call it the only reason I'm not an icicle. There's a certain art to peasant bedding. Everyone has their quirks. Your older brother insists on a layer of dried moss underneath everything, claims it insulates better. Your aunt once tried using sheep's wool, but the smell lingered. Someone else swears by layering with old sacks. You, though, you trust in the straw. It's noisy, unforgiving, and somehow comforting, like a judgmental friend who still lets you crash on their floor. And then comes the main event: clumping. You and your family gather each night, not in assigned places, but wherever there's space, warmth, and the least amount of goat droppings. You pile in shoulders to shoulders, feet near the hearth, if you're lucky, near the door if you've annoyed someone. Tonight will be no different. You already know where you'll end up between your brother, who twitches in his sleep, and the back wall, which has a suspicious draft. You'll wrap yourself in your layers, pull the shared blanket tight, and hope nobody rolls over too enthusiastically. Historians still argue whether communal sleeping was a matter of necessity or social custom. Some say it was about warmth, others about protection, especially in homes with weak doors and too many wild animals lurking nearby. Either way, it's your reality. And as strange as it sounds, you've grown to like it. There's something oddly peaceful about falling asleep to the rhythm of breathing around you, the crackle of the fire, the shifting straw, even the occasional grunt from the piglet in the corner who's made itself a nest out of someone's spare tunic. You remember being younger, how weird it felt at first, pressed between bodies, unable to move without waking someone. But now it's just home. There's no privacy, sure, but there's security, warmth, and the quiet understanding that everyone's in this together. You finish straightening the bed and toss a blanket over it. It's rough wool patched in 7 places and probably older than you. You pull it to your face and inhale it. Smells like smoked dried grass and vaguely of onions. You smile. Weirdly, it smells like safety. By mid-afternoon, clouds begin rolling in outside, thick and gray. Snow's coming. You can feel it in your bones. the kind of heavy snow that settles deep and doesn't melt for days. Your father has already started moving extra wood inside, stacking it in neat, slumped piles by the hearth. You help out dragging in a few bundles of dried rushes and some peat bricks. Your fingers go numb fast, so you work quickly, shoving them into the corner with the others. There's not enough, but there never is. You'll ration it like you always do. Later, as the sun begins to vanish behind thick sky, you sit down for your evening meal. Boiled barley, maybe a carrot if someone bartered well at the market, and a piece of bread so dense it might qualify as a weapon. You eat slowly, letting the heat work its way through your chest. It's not delicious, but it's warm, and it fills you up enough that your body stops yelling at you. And then, as the darkness falls, the clumping begins. One by one, your family starts migrating toward the bed. Your sister wraps herself in a shawl and collapses near the edge. Your mother arranges the baby with practiced care, cocooned in layers and tucked into the warmest spot like a precious loaf of rising dough. You join them sliding into your designated slice of space. The straw crackles beneath you. The blanket gets pulled and readjusted 7 times. Someone sneezes. The goat sighs and settles down. You pull your scarf over your mouth and nose. Your breath warms the cloth, quickly creating a small, humid microclimate that's about as glamorous as it sounds. Still, it's better than waking up coughing from inhaling ice air all night. Outside, the wind begins to pick up. You can hear it moaning through the thatch, rattling the door latch, trying to find its way in. But it won't. Not tonight. You're wrapped in warmth, not luxury, not comfort, but shared breath, shared heat, shared endurance. You close your eyes, hand curled beneath your chin, and let sleep come. The fire murmurs in the background. The snow begins to fall. And inside this little hut of mud, straw, and stubbornness, you are warm. It's well past midnight when you wake again, not fully, but enough to register the soft hiss of wind pushing against the door and the distant creak of something shifting in the rafters. The kind of sounds that would terrify someone in a manor house, but for you are just winter's background music. Your eyes crack open, catching the glow of the banked fire still alive, still holding. You smile faintly proud of your earlier handiwork. There is something deeply satisfying about winning the nightly battle against freezing, even if it's just by a few stubborn embers. A cough ripples through the sleeping pile, then another. Your sister, probably. It's dry for now, but your mother stirs anyway, instinct guiding her in a way that only mothers seem to have. She pulls the blanket up higher over the girl's shoulders, adjusts her scarf, then slides back down into the tangle of bodies without a word. No one fully wakes. No one needs to. That's just the rhythm of winter. You lie there, not quite asleep, not quite awake, listening. The sounds of the hut are familiar. The slow breathing of your father, the quiet snore of the goat, the occasional cluck from the chicken who dreams too loudly. There's something comforting in the shared noises, a reminder that you're not facing this cold alone. And in the medieval world, alone is rarely survivable. Your thoughts drift to the stories passed down about long winters. How some families survived blizzards so fierce they couldn't open their doors for days, relying on smoked meat, root vegetables, and each other's warmth. There's even a tale about a man who slept in a bread oven during a particularly brutal winter. You don't know if it's true, but honestly, it sounds brilliant. You shift slightly, adjusting your scarf where it's begun to dampen from your breath. Sleeping with your mouth covered is a double-edged sword. It traps warmth, yes, but by morning, the fabric clings to your lips like a soggy dish rag. Still worth it. Historians still argue whether these makeshift breath warmers were widely used or just a desperate innovation by a few clever households. Either way, in your family, it's standard practice. Everyone's got a scarf or shawl wrapped tight at night. Even the goat has been spotted nosing around the rags pile like it's hoping to get a turn. A gust of wind rattles the shutters. You open your eyes just enough to see that someone's already pushed the log back against the door. Good. You don't need a repeat of last winter when the wind blew it open and the entire hut woke up covered in snow, blinking like confused ghosts. You roll over and tuck your knees in tighter. Your toes meet someone else's, a small foot, probably your cousin. It's cold, of course, but together you create a little pocket of shared heat. It's not luxury, it's not even comfort, but it's survival, and oddly, it's not terrible. Food comes to mind, not because you're hungry, but because you remember how last night's meal, thick porridge, turnip slices, and that weirdly chewy bit of dried meat actually kept you warmer through the night. Heavy food sticks to your bones, burns longer, keeps your stomach from growling you awake at 3 a.m. You smile at the memory of your younger brother dramatically declaring he'd rather starve than eat another boiled turnip. He got exactly 6 hours into that hunger strike before sneaking a bite of leftover mash and pretending it never happened. Nobody said anything. We all understood. Turnips taste like despair, but they work. You let the image go and return to the sounds, the fire's soft rustle, the shuffle of a blanket, someone's gentle wheeze. There's a rhythm to winter, a pulse that slows everything down. You don't rise with the sun because the sun barely rises. You don't rush your chores because your fingers go numb if you move too quickly. You don't complain, well, not loudly, because complaining takes energy you can't afford to burn. You just endure. And in these moments, staring at the rafters, listening to the breathing around you, you realize how much of medieval winter is built on endurance. The fire banks, the layers, the communal huddling. It's not about comfort, it's about lasting until the thaw. And then doing it all again next year. The wind outside howls again, louder now, like it's circling the village looking for cracks. It presses against your home, testing the seams, but your walls hold. The thatch trembles, but the roof remains. You press your cheek against your rolled-up shawl and let out a slow, quiet breath. You're safe for now. Tomorrow the chores will return. Firewood to gather, water to haul, maybe a roof patch if the wind's been mischievous. But that's tomorrow's battle. Tonight, you've done enough. The warmth from the fire lingers just far enough to keep your core from shivering. The scarf around your face grows damp, but not soaked. The goat doesn't move. The baby sighs in her sleep. and slowly, softly, you drift back down past the straw, past the aches, past the quiet murmur of your breath to sleep, wrapped in the arms of winter, the kind that doesn't kill, the kind that lets you rest. By morning, you're not exactly rested, but you're intact. And in winter, that's a win. You blink the crust from your eyes and sit up slowly, trying not to wake the snoring mass of blankets and limbs beside you. The fire is down to little more than a whisper of orange beneath a skin of ash, but it's not out. Your shoulders drop with relief. Someone must have gotten up to tend it, bless their frozen heroic soul. The room smells like wood-smoked cabbage and goat. Again, you'd complain, but you can't remember what not goat smells like anymore. You shift aside your makeshift shawl and stretch spine popping like a string of cold beans. Then comes the ritual boot replacement. The clogs you kicked off last night are exactly where you left them, near the hearth, drying. You pick one up and knock a mouse out of it before slipping it on. Classic medieval mood. Breakfast is thin barley broth shared in chipped bowls. No talking yet, just the sound of slurping and creaking wood. You eat slowly more for the heat than the taste. Your father mutters something about splitting more peat. Your sister sneezes herself halfway across the blanket. The air inside the hut isn't warm, but it's a polite few degrees above freezing. You'll take it. You're wearing 4 shirts anyway. And under all that, the same underlayer you've worn for 3 weeks. And will probably wear for 3 more. Welcome to the magic of layering. You don't remove clothes in winter unless they're wet or on fire. Even then you think twice. Today's plan is simple. Keep the fire going, haul more wood or dung, check the roof, rewrap your feet, survive. But first, you must patch the wall. There's a new draft. You felt it during the night like a ghost dragging cold fingers along your neck. You locate it near the corner where the daub has crumbled again. A gentle reminder that your home is made of mud and dried weeds. Nature doesn't care that it's shelter. It wants its sticks back. You kneel tucking a wool scrap into the gap. Not perfect, but better. It's the kind of fix that will hold for a few days, maybe, if the wind's feeling generous. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants frequently repaired their homes themselves or relied on communal building efforts. In your village, the answer is yes. Everyone does both. You patch your hut, your neighbor patches his, and once a month, someone organizes a thatch repair day complete with cider and a mild chance of injury. Your hut is nothing fancy, just 1 room, maybe 2 if you count the lean-to, where the chickens sleep. But it's yours. Well, technically, it's the Lord's. But as long as the taxes are paid and you keep the roof mostly upright, no one bothers you much. You step outside and are immediately slapped by the wind. Again. You pull your hood low and squint toward the path. Snow not much, but enough to crunch beneath your clogs. You see your neighbor trudging past with a bundle of kindling on his back. He nods. You nod. That's more conversation than some people manage all week. You gather a bundle of dried reeds from the side of the hut and carry them back inside. They'll go fast in the fire, but every little bit helps. You remember one winter when the fire went out entirely and you and your brother took turns heating rocks in the neighbor's hearth and carrying them back wrapped in wool. It almost worked, except for the burn marks on the floor and your hands. The fire crackles again as you feed it a reed. You sigh satisfied. Then someone opens the door and ruins everything. A fresh blast of air invades the hut like a rude guest. Everyone groans. It's your aunt. She shuffles in cheeks, red teeth, chattering, carrying a basket of what might be bread and definitely smells like onions. Brought some stew, she announces, already moving toward the hearth. You love her. You do. But she walks like she owns the heat. Still, the stew is welcome. A thick, lumpy concoction of root vegetables, salted something, and a mysterious hint of cloves. You ladle some into your bowl and hold it in your lap like treasure. The warmth spreads slowly, thawing your fingers. And then comes a moment, a small one, but it sticks. Your family is gathered near the fire. Your aunt is humming. Your brother is pretending not to fall asleep with his bowl in his lap. The goat is chewing hay like it's fine dining. The baby hiccups and grins. No one is freezing. No one is coughing. Not right now. For just a breath, you feel okay. You lean back against the wall, steaming bowl in hand, and look around. The hut is dark, but the fire casts a golden glow. The smoke curls gently toward the roof. Outside, the snow falls softly. Inside, you are wrapped in layers of fabric and family, and you're surviving. Not thriving, not celebrating, but surviving. And in this season, that's enough. By midday, you're already on your second round of rewrapping your feet. The cloth strips you used earlier have turned stiff with moisture, and there's a suspicious smell that suggests the goat stepped on them sometime during the night. You peel them off, wince at the sight of your toes, red, angry somehow, both dry and clammy, and start layering again. This time, you use an old scarf your cousin abandoned last spring. It's scratchy, but at least it doesn't smell like livestock. You stuff your newly wrapped feet back into your wooden clogs and hobble to the door like a hero returning from battle. The wind is quieter now, though the air outside remains cruel, curling its way down your neck, no matter how tightly you tie your hood. You're heading to the southern side of the village, where the afternoon sun sometimes hits just right, and there's still a chance of finding dry twigs or bark. It's not glamorous work. You're essentially scavenging, scraping bits of fuel off trees like you're begging nature for leftovers. You pass by old fence posts, some already half stolen by neighbors under the guise of just borrowing it for a day or two. You eye them too. Fence or fire, sometimes it's a choice. On the way, you wave to the old man who lives near the stream, the one with one eye and 4 teeth, but a talent for knowing who's sick before they even start coughing. He's crouched near his own meager fire pit, feeding it with what looks like bundled moss. You make a mental note. If he's down to moss, it's going to be a long winter. As you gather kindling, you remember something your father said last year. A fire's not just fuel, it's planning. Every stick you burn today is one you'll miss tomorrow. You weren't in the mood to hear it then, but now, with your fingers going numb despite your gloves, you get it. Every scrap matters. Your haul isn't impressive, Some bark a few decent branches and something that might be dry peat. Still you hug it to your chest like treasure and begin the trek back. The wind has shifted again, slicing up from the north, and your cloak flaps behind you like it's trying to escape this life. Back at the hut, the door's been propped open with a rock. You groan. Drafts are the enemy. You shove it closed with your foot and mutter something your grandmother would definitely not approve of. She used to say winter was a test of patience, of grit, and of how many layers you could wear without losing the ability to bend your elbows. Inside the hearth is still alive, though the flames are low and tired. You add the bark some moss, and finally one of the precious dry twigs. The fire hisses, then catches. You watch it grow with quiet pride. One of the children is drawing in the ash near the hearth. Nothing fancy, just little circles and stick figures, a goat with wild eyes, and maybe a few questionably shaped people. You lean over and add a sun to the picture. It's optimistic. It probably won't show up for another week. Then your mother calls out from the bedding pile. The baby is fussing again, too cold maybe, or just tired of being swaddled like a winter sausage. You go over hands outstretched and take her carefully. She's tiny, red-faced and angry at the air. You wrap her tighter and walk her gently back to the fire. Babies are fragile in winter. Everyone knows it. One bad night, one missed feeding, and things can spiral. That's why the village elders are always checking on newborns. Not out of nosiness, out of survival. You rock her gently, muttering nonsense, and patting her back in time with the fire's crackle. She blinks up at you, soot-smudged and unimpressed, but the crying stops. You smile down at her, feeling the weight of warmth and responsibility in your arms. She'll grow into the same mud, the same straw, the same fire rituals. But maybe she'll also inherit this resilience, the quiet kind, shaped by bitter nights and the smell of smoke in your hair. Historians still argue whether medieval infants had high survival rates during winter, or if we're simply hearing more about the ones who made it. The truth is probably both. Some lived, some didn't, but each one that did was a kind of miracle, a little ember that didn't go out. She drifts off again, mouth slightly open, cheek pressed against your shoulder. You settle her into the warmest spot nestled between blankets and bodies, then tuck the covering up to her ears. Outside, a crow caws once sharp and distant. You walk back to the hearth and sit down slowly, letting your hands hover above the flames. The heat stings your cracked skin. You like it anyway. Someone asks if there's enough wood left for tonight. You nod, lying just a little. Someone else suggests heating stones to slip under the blanket. You nod again. Already planned it. You've been gathering smooth ones near the stream for weeks, hiding them in a pile by the door. Not exactly treasure, but close. As the afternoon wanes, the hut fills with the hum of quiet conversation. Your uncle talks about a nearby village that lost their roof in a storm. Your cousin swears he saw a fox steal a chicken from 3 doors down. Someone starts prepping supper, another round of thick stew spiced with salt if you're lucky, and soot if you're not. You poke the fire again, turning one of the peat bricks just so. It smolders obediently. The warmth spreads outward, not fast, but enough. Tonight, the snow might fall harder, the wind might scream louder, but you'll be ready. And as you glance at the fire, at the sleeping baby, at the scratched up floor, and the soot stained rafters, you realize something. You're not just enduring winter, you're mastering it, one ember at a time. Evening creeps in early. The sun, such as it is, dips behind a low smudge of cloud, barely past its noon climb. Shadows lengthen inside the hut, and you can feel the mood of the day shift, not into fear exactly, but into caution. Everyone knows what night brings the true cold, not the teasing breeze of morning or the chill of your clogs, but the creeping, deliberate cold that tries to find the cracks in your bones. You roll your shoulders and start your evening routine. The fire gets nudged with a poker, the coals examined like they're old friends about to be asked for a favor. You start prepping the stone's flat, palm-sized river rocks that hold heat well. You set them close to the fire, now letting them soak in the warmth. Later, they'll be wrapped in cloth and tucked under bedding like secret sons. Around you, the rest of the family is slowly doing the same. It's a practice dance, one with no choreography and no words. Your cousin lays out the extra blanket threadbare but better than nothing. Your aunt double checks the thatch over the cradle corner, feeling for leaks. Your mother quietly counts out the remaining bundles of firewood. No one says this will have to last. You all know the hut grows quieter as dinner finishes. Bowls are scraped clean, and the pot is emptied not because you were full, but because there was nothing left. Someone jokes about turnips and dreams, and there's a soft ripple of laughter, the kind that's more habit than humor. You're too tired to laugh properly, but still, you do. Then comes the final preparation before sleep, the sealing of the hut. You walk to the door and place the thickest log you can find against the frame. It's warped from use, splintered on one end, but it holds firm. You plug the biggest holes around it with cloth, mostly patches too ruined to sew into anything useful. In the corner, you find the old sheepskin, moth-eaten and stiff, but good enough to tack over the biggest draft in the back wall. You press it into place and step back, arms crossed, surveying your work. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actively winter-proofed their homes or simply endured whatever came. Your hut says it's a little of both. Sure, some things are beyond your control, like the roof, which is currently muttering in the wind, but you've done what you can. Before bed, your grandmother whispers a short prayer near the hearth. It's half blessing, half reminder to the fire, stay alive, we need you. The candles, short, stubby things with a scent somewhere between beeswax and desperation, are snuffed one by one. Darkness spreads slowly, gently. Only the fire remains glowing like the last memory of the sun. You wrap the hot stones in rags and pass them out. The baby gets the smallest tucked in by her feet. You get one for your stomach, an old trick to keep your core warm. You hold it there beneath your layers, the heat seeping through like kindness. Then the sleeping begins. You lie down near the back wall, not the best spot, but not the worst either. The straw has already been reshaped, the blanket pulled high. You slip into your usual curl, one arm tucked under your headscarf, wrapped so snugly around your face that you can barely breathe, but it's warm. The others file in beside you. The arrangement changes nightly, but tonight you're wedged between your brother and your mother. Your brother always twitches. Your mother doesn't move. You're not sure which is better. As everyone settles, the sounds of night return: the soft sigh of straw, the shift of a shoulder, the fire cracking softly as it digests the last of the peat. It's a chorus you've heard every winter of your life, and yet each night feels slightly different. Tonight, you notice how the wind outside is less a howl and more a whisper, like it's learned all your names and is calling them slowly through the cracks. You tug your scarf higher. You can't sleep yet. You're on the early watch. It's not a formal system. No one drew straws or rang a bell, but someone has to stay up for a bit just to be sure. The fire needs tending. The door might creak open, and if one of the little ones starts coughing, someone needs to be awake enough to notice. So you stay up. You sit beside the fire again, poking it gently, coaxing the flames to dance just a bit longer. Your eyes drift across the hut. The candle stubs are cold. The baby's breathing is soft. The goat is twitching in its sleep, probably dreaming about shoes it can chew. You smirk. There's a kind of peace in these moments. Not comfort, not safety exactly, but quiet. Clarity. You're here. They're here. The roof is still over your heads. The fire is still breathing. You toss on one more twig. Not too much. Just enough to say we're still fighting. And maybe tomorrow the sun will come back. Or maybe it won't. But either way, you'll be ready. Because this isn't just sleep. It's strategy. You're barely asleep when it happens. A gust of wind so sharp it finds every invisible crack in the hut and shoves its icy fingers straight across your cheek. You jolt awake, blinking into the blackness, confused by the sudden cold, brushing your face. Then you hear it, the wooden door creaking softly, not open, but nudged just enough to whisper. Something's not sealed right. You grope around for your scarf, which has migrated somewhere near your ear, and sit up. A few others shift in their sleep, but no one wakes. You tiptoe toward the door your clogs left behind, because stepping softly matters more than frostbite right now. Each footfall on the cold straw sends a little jolt up your spine. You press your hand against the door's edge. A sliver of air pushes back. Ah, that stubborn corner again. You adjust the log against the base and shove a strip of woven rushes into the gap. The wind quiets, and yet you stay standing there a moment longer, just listening. Beyond the door, the night groans. It's the kind of sound you don't forget, raw, endless, and far too alive. The cold isn't just outside, it's prowling, looking for ways in. You glance around the hut. Everyone's asleep. Straw rustles under slow breath. A snore here, a sigh there. The baby lets out a gurgle and shifts deeper into the folds of wool wrapped around her. You return to the fire, feet at the smallest peat brick left, and sit back down. The warmth is modest, but steady. It doesn't cheer you, but it doesn't abandon you either. And as your body begins to relax again, You remember something your grandfather used to say, one of those odd bits of peasant wisdom passed down with equal parts sarcasm and reverence. If the wind don't get you, the cabbage dreams might. Aw, cabbage dreams. You've been lucky so far this winter, but you've seen it happen. People who eat a heavy meal right before bed sometimes drift into strange territory visions filled with talking livestock, backwards priests, or flying porridge bowls. Some say it's your stomach fighting back. Others say it's the turnips seeking revenge. Historians still argue whether these dreams were influenced more by undercooked vegetables, mild food poisoning, or the general trauma of medieval life. You've had 2 cabbage dreams in your life, and that was enough to swear off eating anything thick after sunset? It's one of those unspoken rules now. Keep dinner light. Keep sleep peaceful. But not everyone follows that rule. From the back of the hut comes a low mumble, "Your uncle." He twitches in his sleep, muttering something about a dancing bishop. You roll your eyes and silently hope he doesn't thrash too hard. Last time he kicked over the chamber pot, and that was a night no one forgot. As the hut begins to settle again, you drift back toward your bedding. You lie down carefully, pulling the blanket up and tucking your knees in. The fire's glow flickers across the wall, casting long, slow-moving shadows. You count them like sheep. 1, 2, 3. A creak in the rafters. You glance upward. Just the thatch shifting, or maybe a rat rethinking its life choices. Either way, not your problem right now. Sleep comes in waves. You don't get to dive into it. You have to sneak up on it, coax it like catching a bird with your bare hands. You dream of warmth, but not the real kind. You dream of hot baths and thick furs of castles with tapestries and beds with feathers. Your subconscious has clearly never been to a castle, but it's doing its best with the stories it's heard. In your dream, the goat is wearing a crown and demanding that you fetch it clogs in the correct size. You argue that goats don't wear shoes, and it calls you ignorant. You wake up with a snort and realize someone has kicked the blanket off your shoulder. You yank it back and glare into the dark. Probably your brother. You can tell by the pointy elbow. Still, you can't help but laugh quietly into your scarf. These are your people. Elbows, goats, cabbage dreams, and all. Outside, the cold presses harder. Inside, you adjust, adapt, endure. You close your eyes again and pull the scarf tighter. Your breath warms the space around your mouth even as your toes flirt with numbness. The fire behind your eyelids glows soft. Somewhere between this moment and the next, you drift back into sleep. And this time, the goat in your dream doesn't wear a crown, it wears mittens. You decide that's an improvement. When you wake again, it's to the distinct sound of dripping water, a noise that would bring joy in spring, but in winter, it means one thing: something's leaking. Again, you groan softly and sit up. Your back protests. Your knees creak. Your blanket, once carefully tucked, has shifted halfway off your legs, and your toes are colder than truth on a bad day. You scan the room, eyes adjusting to the murky light of pre-dawn. Drip, drip, drip. There it is. Right in the corner above the sleeping goat, a patch of thatch has given up and let in the snow melt. You sigh and start gathering your repair supplies, more thatch, a dull knife, and your least favorite scarf again. That poor scarf has had more careers than most people: neckwear, draft stopper, goat leash, and now roof patching assistant. Climbing up to fix the thatch is tricky. You crawl into the lean-to corner, knees braced on damp straw, trying not to wake the goat, who is thoroughly uninterested in your renovations. With careful hands, you wedge the new thatch into the crack, knotting the scarf around a rafter beam to hold it in place. It's not beautiful, but it holds. And beauty left the building 3 layers of wool ago. Back down, you wipe your hands on your tunic and poke the fire back to life. The embers respond reluctantly, like they too would prefer to stay asleep. You feel that? By now, others are stirring. Your brother is blinking at the ceiling with a scowl, clearly having been booted by someone in the night. Your mother is checking the baby's layers, tucking and adjusting like a master strategist. The morning begins in silence, not because anyone is cranky, but because talking requires energy you'd rather not spend yet. The fire picks up crackling softly, and slowly the room begins to feel like less of a tomb. You place your hands over the heat and notice the skin is cracked again, fingers dried out by smoke wool and scrubbing frost from everything. You'd give anything for a bowl of warm water to soak them in. Instead, you spit lightly on a cloth and rub it over your knuckles. It stings, but it helps. You think about how many winters you've done this. Not just you, your parents, your grandparents. They probably had the same cold floors, same frozen doors, same goats chewing on corner rags. It's comforting in a weird way. The cycle of hardship handed down like a story. Historians still argue whether the repetition of peasant life was oppressive or grounding. The truth probably depends on the day. On mornings like this, it feels survivable. Routine. You don't enjoy it, but you know it. And there's a strange power in knowing how to survive your environment better than it survives you. Someone passes you a hunk of bread. It's hard, stale, but warm from being near the fire. You chew slowly, grateful for the warmth, if not the flavor. You dip it into a cup of thin broth and imagine it's soup from a royal kitchen. It's not, of course, but imagination is one of the few luxuries you have in excess. A knock at the door startles you. Not common, not expected. Your father answers, pulling the door open just enough to reveal your neighbor, bundled in every piece of cloth she owns, cheeks bright pink from the wind. Her fire's gone out. You already know what that means. Within minutes, she's inside, shuffling toward your hearth with trembling hands. She carries a small clay bowl wrapped in linen. She doesn't have to ask. Your mother gestures for you to help. You kneel by the fire and use the poker to dig carefully into the coals, uncovering a still burning ember. With practiced hands, you place it in her bowl, surrounding it with moss and a bit of kindling. You rewrap the linen and she holds it like it's a newborn. You offer her a seat. She shakes her head. "I'll go quickly," she says. "It's for my son." You nod. She leaves. That's the thing about winter. It strips life down to what's essential. There's no room for pride, no space for hesitation. just the need to keep the fire alive in every hut for every soul. You watch the door close behind her and feel the cold rush in, then fade as it's sealed again. She'll make it, you think. She's fast. She knows the path. And if she doesn't, someone will follow. Your father says nothing, but he steps to the fire and adds another log. It hisses, catches, burns. You spend the next hour preparing for more visitors. Word will spread that your fire was still strong this morning. Others will come, some to borrow embers, others just to sit near the warmth for a while, share a story, remind themselves what heat feels like. And you'll let them, because in winter, fire isn't just for the house, it's for the village. You wrap another ember bundle in cloth and set it aside ready for whoever knocks next. Outside, snow begins again. Inside, the hearth glows. By midday, the line of visitors has tapered off. 3 more families came by, each with their own cracked bowls, carefully folded cloth, and hollow-eyed thanks. You gave them what you could: embers, a seat near the hearth, even a few strips of dried rush for kindling. They didn't linger. No one does. Not because they're ungrateful, but because they know you're burning through your own precious fuel just to help. You're down to your last 2 peat bricks. The rest of the wood pile has been reduced to odd shapes, bark, moss, bundles, damp twig. You weigh your options like a general surveying the battlefield. Use 1 brick now and hope for a warmer night. Or save both, stretch the rushes through the day, and risk frostbite if the wind picks up again. You stare at the fire. It doesn't blink, doesn't offer advice, just waits. The decision is interrupted by the sound of your uncle muttering prayers at the door. Again. He's got his chalk, and he's drawing a symbol above the frame, an old one meant to keep out winter spirits. It's a crude spiral with a line through it flanked by 2 dots. Looks like an insult in a forgotten language, but he swears it helps. You don't argue. This is the time of year when people believe in everything. Blessings, omens, curses, superstitions wrapped in wool. Whether it's holy water or a well-placed potato in the rafters, if it keeps the cold away, people will try it. Your aunt joins him lighting a candle that's been blessed by the village priest. It's stubby, melted into a squat little column, but she sets it in a jar and places it near the door. It casts a tiny glow, barely enough to see by, but enough to feel seen by. You sit and watch the flame flicker, a fragile golden thread, straining against the wind, pressing on the walls. Historians still argue how much medieval people blended folk belief with religious ritual in the face of harsh winters. Some claim these practices were simply symbolic comforts. Others insist they were psychological tools for survival, ways of anchoring the soul when the body had nothing left to give. You're not sure who's right, but tonight the chalk mark stays. You eat late what's left of the turnip stew from last night, thickened with barley and flavored with hope. The pot scrapes loud against the bottom. There won't be much for tomorrow, but everyone eats quietly grateful. Even the goat gets a crust of stale bread, which it devours as if it were cake. After the bowls are licked clean and the fire has been gently stoked, your grandmother begins her usual ritual, telling a story. She always begins the same way. Not with once upon a time, but with a long pause, as if she's pulling the words from the air like thread from the fog. Tonight's tale is about the winter watchers, the old village tradition of people who couldn't work the fields anymore, but still served in their own way. They were the ones who kept track of which homes had gone quiet, who hadn't been seen in days, who was coughing harder than usual. A kind of unofficial patrol woven into the rhythm of village life like straw into bedding. You listen, chin resting on your knees, as she describes the subtle signs: no smoke from a chimney, no footprints in fresh snow, no voice at the morning market. The watchers would knock gently just once. If there was no answer, they'd return with help. It's eerie thinking about people vanishing like that. Not with ceremony, not with mourning, just disappearing into the cold. But your grandmother doesn't tell it like a ghost story. She tells it like a reminder that surviving winter wasn't just about staying warm. It was about watching each other, remembering who was still here and who needed help to stay. You glance at the door at the chalk mark, now dry and slightly crooked. You wonder if someone's already noticed your fire has been brighter this week. If one of the old men with the frost-chapped hands has nodded and thought they'll make it another night. The story fades out. The hut grows quiet again. The goat shuffles. A child yawns. The wind outside picks up, tapping lightly at the shutter like it's trying to eavesdrop. You move back toward your bedding, rearranging the straw. It's damp again in one corner. You flip the blanket, relayer the rags, and slip in with practiced efficiency. The stones you heated earlier still hold a bit of warmth. You nestle one at your feet and try not to think too hard about how cold tomorrow might be. You adjust your scarf over your face, tucking it just beneath your nose. Your breath makes a tiny cave of warmth inside the fabric. Your brother coughs, once then rolls over, stealing a bit more of the blanket with him. You sigh. Typical. The fire hisses softly in the dark. You let your eyes close, and somewhere between the breath you take now and the one you don't remember tomorrow, you hear your grandmother whisper, "Count your embers, watch your neighbors, and always, always bank the fire." The next morning, the cold hits different. It's not harsher, it's quieter. A kind of stillness that settles over the village like a thick blanket. The kind of morning where even the wind forgets to move, and the sky stays an even sheet of gray stretching from one horizon to the other like a lid on the world. You notice it the moment you open your eyes. The fire's still faintly alive, glowing in the belly of the hearth like a watchful eye. But the air is heavy. Your breath fogs in front of your face and hangs there, reluctant to dissipate. You lie still, tucked deep into your scarf, trying to decide whether you're ready to face this flavor of cold. You're not, but you get up anyway. The floor is brittle with frost. A shimmer clings to the straw like a sugar coating, pretty in a cruel way. You step carefully, pulling on your clogs and pressing your feet into the damp cloth inside. You've stopped expecting comfort. At this point, you're just hoping for not worse. You stoke the fire first, always first. The coals respond with a lazy hiss, and you add a bit of moss and a dry reed. The flame is slow to rise today, like it too is unsure about this morning. You whisper to it as you work. A little nonsense, a little pleading. Sometimes you think the fire listens better when you talk to it like a skittish animal. Once the flame catches, you sit for a moment, palms stretched toward the heat. You watch the light flicker on the walls, casting dancing shadows across the rough daub and the old timber beams. This hut has seen things, held people, kept them warm, or tried to. As the others stir, you hear a familiar creak from the doorframe. Your sister is up wrapped in every shawl she owns, hair sticking out in sleepy tufts, face set in a half-awake frown. She joins you without a word, holds her hands out, and lets the warmth find her. Today, your family will take turns going outside for chores. You've got to check the water hole again. If it's frozen too thick, you'll have to find another source. Your cousin is already sharpening a stick to poke through the ice. Last week, he fell in up to his ankles and came back cursing loudly enough to wake the neighbor's rooster. You still tease him about it. He still doesn't find it funny. The thing is, medieval winter doesn't attack not in dramatic ways. It seeps. It gnaws. It wears you down frostbit by frostbit until even your thoughts feel stiff. That's why people invented rituals. Not just the chalk marks or the candle blessings, but little things too. You take the same path to the water hole. You use the same order to wrap your layers. You whisper the same half-formed phrase when banking the fire, even if it means nothing. You need something to feel like control. You head outside after breakfast, another bowl of barley stew that tasted almost entirely of smoke and boiled hope. The sky is still that endless dull gray, the kind of sky that makes noon look like twilight. As you crunch through the snow, you notice the stillness again. No one speaking. Even the livestock are subdued. A thin curl of smoke rises from each chimney, and that's when you realize one house doesn't have any. You stop. The Wilsons' house. No smoke, no footprints, no sound. Your breath catches in your throat, not from cold, but from knowing. You glance around. A few others have noticed too. No one says anything. No one needs to. You walk quickly back to your hut and grab a wrapped ember bowl from near the hearth, the one your mother always keeps ready just in case. Your father meets your eyes and gives a quiet nod. He knows where you're going. He doesn't stop you. You trudge through the snow with the bowl in both hands, careful not to let the wind sneak under the cloth. The bowl's warmth radiates against your palms, pulsing like a heartbeat. You reach their door knock gently, once, twice. No answer. You push it open. Inside it's cold. Not just no fire cold, but deep cold. Still cold. The kind of cold that sinks into corners and doesn't expect to leave. You find them huddled together near the hearth, all wrapped in blankets, eyes wide, but weary. They're alive, but barely. Their fire had died in the night. No one had the strength to rebuild it. The wood was wet, the moss was frozen, and the baby was too sick to be left alone. You don't speak. You just kneel and unwrap your bowl. The ember glows like a tiny sun. You build them a fire. It takes time. Their kindling is poor, their sticks damp. You dry what you can near the ember. You fan gently, feeding the flame with breath and care until it finally catches. You don't realize you're crying until the tears sting your cheeks in the cold. They don't thank you, at least not with words, but their eyes do, and their hands when they take yours in brief, shivering gratitude. You stay a while long enough to make sure the flame will last, long enough to wrap the baby in a fresh shawl and tuck a warm stone beneath her feet. Then you nod and return to your hut. When you get back, your brother hands you a bowl of stew without a word. You eat slowly. You don't tell them what you saw. You don't need to. Because here in this season, in this cold, keeping the fire isn't just warm, it's witness. The cold that night feels deeper, not in temperature, but in tone, like the wind has learned your name and begun muttering it through the shutters. You bank the fire more carefully than usual, layering peat with a reverence normally reserved for religious rituals. You pause a moment longer over the glowing coals, whispering your usual half prayer, half command. Stay. Just stay. The hut quiets early. Everyone's exhausted. Your cousin has a mild cough. Your sister is quieter than usual, her eyes shadowed but stubborn. The baby sleeps without fuss, which should be comforting, but sometimes stillness makes you worry more than noise. You slide into the bed pile, nestling in beside your brother. Tonight, he doesn't even twitch when you elbow him for blanket space. That's how you know he's tired. You breathe into your scarf and close your eyes, waiting for sleep like a hunter waiting for prey. But it doesn't come quickly. Instead, your mind drifts, wandering through memories like a cold hand through water. You think about summers past when the sun used to flood the fields and you'd lie belly up in the grass, daring the sky to move. You remember the warmth of your skin, then the lightness of breathing. Now everything is heavy. Even your dreams come slower. You finally drift off sometime after midnight, only to wake an hour later to the unmistakable sound of a draft creeping through the wall near your feet. Again, you groan inwardly and reach out, groping for the rag pile. You plug the gap with something that feels like a sock or maybe half a sleeve, then roll back over. Only then do you realize that the fire's almost out. You blink toward the hearth. It's dark. Not quiet dark. Dead dark. Your pulse quickens. Not out of panic, there's no time for that, but out of calculation. You toss off the blanket and scramble toward the fire pit, trying not to wake the others. The coals are black. Not even a stubborn ember, buried in ash. Gone. You start again, working from memory, from muscle, from the quiet kind of fear that has nothing to do with monsters and everything to do with frost. You grab the flint from its usual corner, the steel, the tinderbox, kneel, strike, miss, strike again. Sparks jump, land, smother themselves in the cold ash. You mutter, strike again, and this time one catches. The flame is a whisper, barely real. You breathe it to life, and suddenly you remember the villagers say a fire relit after midnight is bad luck, that it invites spirits, that it draws the attention of something older than winter. You glance around. No ghosts. Just your sleeping family breathing like slow waves. You add a few rushes, then peat. The flame grows haltingly, reluctant, but willing. You sit back and exhale, heart pounding from the cold and the effort and the 1,000-year-old fear that somehow this time the fire might not come back. Historians still debate how common these superstitions were, if they were genuinely believed or just stories to keep children cautious. You don't care. You've seen enough nights to know that anything which reminds you to respect the fire is worth repeating. Eventually the room warms enough that your breath stops fogging the air. You stretch out beside the hearth, too cold to return to the bed pile, too tired to keep sitting upright. That's when you notice your mother's eyes open across the room. She says nothing, just watches, then gives the faintest nod. You did it. You stare into the fire. It stares back. And for a while the two of you just sit together, two survivors in the same fragile room, flickering in the dark. The next morning, when the light finally seeps through the walls like watered-down gold, the cold still lingers. But the fire is burning. Someone passes you a hunk of bread. It's hard as bark, but warm. You chew it slowly. The day begins with less talk than usual. Everyone feels the weight of the nearly lost night. You mend the rag that plugged the draft. You dry a scarf on a stick. You rewrap the baby's hands in wool. Outside, a few snowflakes drift lazily down. The sky threatens more. You go out anyway to fetch water, walking carefully over the icy path. On your way back, you spot your neighbor limping slightly, holding a clay bowl. Another ember run. You nod. He nods. You pass him a bundle of rush and point him toward your hut. Because when someone else's fire dies, it becomes everyone's problem. Later, your grandmother will call you aside and hand you a small charm, a little straw figure wrapped in thread. For your pocket, she says. For the nights when the fire forgets to be kind. You take it. You believe in the fire. But tonight, you'll keep the straw figure close too. Just in case. The charm sits in your pocket like a secret. Just a bit of straw really twisted into a rough humanoid shape and tied off with a thread that used to be part of your mother's apron. But when your fingers curl around it, something in you settles. Superstition, maybe. But in the middle of winter, belief is often more useful than facts. That night, you don't sleep deeply. You wake in layers just enough to listen, for the fire, feel for drafts, check the breathing rhythms around you. Everyone else stirs the same way. No one says it, but you all share the same quiet duty, make it to spring together. In the early dark, the cough starts again, your sister's. Not harsh, not constant, but a soft little bark that tightens your stomach with worry. She pulls the blanket tighter and turns over trying to muffle it. You pretend not to notice. She pretends not to be coughing. This is how you both agree it's not serious. Still, your mother moves in the shadows, crossing the room in her slippered feet to mix something from a jar near the hearth. Onion tea, the answer to everything. Coughing tea, fever tea, sad tea. Then prayers. Probably in that order, you sit up and accept the steaming cup when it's passed your way. It smells sharp, like a kitchen mistake, but you drink it anyway. The warmth spreads down your throat and into your chest. That's what matters. Outside, the snow is falling again. Slow, steady, confident snow. It doesn't rush. It just accumulates like a debt that will need to be paid in spring. After tea, your mother tucks another cloth over your sister and goes back to her own spot by the baby. The little one is still sleeping, but her cheeks are pink with cold. You nudge a heated stone closer beneath her bed mat. Not too close, you remember last winter, when someone scorched the straw and filled the hut with a scent that lived in your nose for weeks. Historians still argue how common it was for medieval peasants to use heated stones in their beds. Some call it an old wives' tale. But you're holding one right now, warm and wrapped in your cousin's old sock, and it's the only thing keeping your feet from turning into frozen root vegetables. Later that morning, after your chores, you head into the woods. It's not a hunting trip. It's not even firewood gathering. It's scouting. You're trying to get ahead. Maybe find something dry enough to use later fallen branches, protected by the thickets, or even a downed tree that can be stripped and stored. It's risky walking alone in the snow, but you know these woods better than you know your cousins. The trees are skeletal in winter. They creak and sway slightly, even without wind, as if tired from holding up so much silence. Every step you take crunches. Every breath curls from your mouth like a smoke signal. You wear your cloak tight and your scarf tighter, the charm in your pocket tapping lightly with each step. You find a patch of fir trees low and heavy-limbed and crouch to check the ground beneath them. Jackpot. Pine needles, dry sticks, and what looks like an entire branch sheltered from the last snow. You grin and get to work finger-stiff but quick. By the time you return to the village, your arms are full and your breath is ragged. A neighbor sees you and raises a hand. You nod. That's about all the conversation you've got left. You store the wood behind your hut, hidden just in case. Not everyone is as honest as they claim to be when the wind bites hard enough. Inside, the fire is steady again. Not strong, but steady. That's a win. You peel off your outer layer, steam rising faintly from your shoulders. Your cousin jokes that you look like a stew. You throw a bit of snow at him. It lands in his hood. He doesn't laugh until 10 minutes later, when it finally melts and slides down his back. Supper that night is thinner than usual, a watery barley broth with only the suggestion of vegetables. But you eat it with quiet appreciation. Every swallow is warm. Every swallow means you're not starving yet. Later, as the hut dims and the hearth glows, your grandmother pulls out the storytelling voice again. This time, she talks about a winter long ago before you were born, when the snow didn't melt until May, when entire roofs collapsed under its weight and people had to tunnel between homes like moles just to share food and gossip. You imagine it, wide-eyed. Tunnels through snow like secret passageways for soup and stories. She finishes the tale with a phrase she always uses, but we got through it, one ember at a time. You hold on to that as you prepare for sleep. Tonight, your place is near the hearth again. You nestle in with the others, your charm still tucked in your palm. Your sister's cough has faded for now. The baby snores a tiny, high-pitched hum like a sleepy kettle. The goat chews something in its sleep. You let your eyes close and think not about spring, but about tomorrow. Just tomorrow. Because winter is conquered one night at a time, and tonight the fire is still burning. The wind changes overnight. You can feel it before you open your eyes, colder, sharper, less like a breeze, and more like something alive. It hisses through the thatch with purpose, testing the walls, tapping gently at the shutters like long fingers. The kind of wind that isn't content to just chill you. It wants to remind you. You sit up slowly, cocooned in a patchwork of scratchy wool and stiff linen. Around you, your family is still asleep, bundled in piles like spoils from a moth-ridden war. The fire's glow is faint, not gone, but faint. You slide carefully out of the bed pile, trying not to step on the goat. You fail. It bleats softly but meaningfully. You mutter an apology that it most definitely ignores. At the hearth, you get to work with quiet fingers. You brush aside the ash cokes, aglow from beneath the sleeping coals, and add a pinch of dried moss and a few splinters. One of the kids must have prepped them yesterday, thank the saints for small miracles. You blow gently. The fire responds slowly, stubborn like everything else in this life. By the time the flames take, your toes are numb again, your scarf damp with breath, and the charm in your pocket is digging into your hip. You leave it there. You've grown attached. The others begin to stir one by one. Your cousin curses the cold. Your mother asks after the baby before she's even fully conscious. Someone passes you a cup of something hot and borderline edible. You drink it. Then the news arrives. A neighbor, a boy, maybe 10, bursts through the door without knocking. His face is red, eyes wide. He's out of breath. The Martin's roof. He gasps. It's gone. Collapsed. No one moves at first. Your father rises, slowly sets down his spoon. "Everyone alive?" he asks. The boy nods. Mostly. Mostly. That word is heavy. It lands like an extra blanket, thick and wet and cold. Your father grabs his boots. You do too. Minutes later, you're trudging across snow so deep it swallows your ankles. The Martins live near the edge of the village where the wind hits harder. Their hut is older built when everyone was still figuring things out. You crest the hill and see it, or what's left of it. The roof has caved inward thatch and snow piled into the center of the home like some cruel offering. A few neighbors are already there, lifting beams, clearing debris. Someone's crying. You don't ask who. The Martins are huddled under a tarp, 2 of them wrapped in cloaks, one bleeding from the scalp. You kneel beside the father. He's shivering, teeth clenched, but alive. You press a warm stone into his hands, one you wrapped before leaving the hut. He nods without looking at you. Work begins immediately. You, your father, and 2 others start hauling what wood you can salvage. Someone brings rope. Another offers her hut for the children to stay in for now. It's a pattern well practiced, born from necessity. Disasters don't announce themselves in winter. They just arrive uninvited and expect a place at the fire. Historians still argue how organized medieval villages really were, whether they worked together out of obligation or if survival simply demanded it. Watching everyone move now without orders, without speeches, you think maybe it's both. Structure born from struggle, kindness forced into habit. By sunset, You've done what you can. The Martins have shelter, temporary but warm. A corner of a neighbor's home, a borrowed blanket, a bowl of hot stew that no one asked them to repay. You return to your own hut, face stinging, muscles sore. Your scarf is frozen in places stiff like bark. You peel it away and rewarm your hands by the fire, which someone else has already tended. For the first time in hours, you allow yourself to breathe fully. Dinner is silent, not solemn, just tired. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone knows it could be them next. Later, your grandmother stands near the door muttering her nightly prayer. She adds an extra line tonight, a soft one, barely audible. You don't catch all of it, but you think you hear the word thatch whispered like it's holy. You go to bed with straw still clinging to your sleeves and snow dried into your socks. Your brother rolls toward you and mumbles something about how lucky the Martins are. You blink. Lucky, you ask. He nods, already fading into sleep. They lived, and he's right. That's the only kind of luck that matters right now. The fire glows steady but quiet. You watch it for a while, then you check the door, then the wall, then the roof, just with your eyes just in case. You lie back down and curl into your usual shape. The charm is still in your pocket. Tomorrow, you'll reinforce the beams. Maybe borrow a hammer. Maybe bless the door frame again. Maybe both, because winter is still here, and luck is a thing you help make. You wake the next morning with straw stuck in your hair and your jaw aching from clenching it in your sleep. At some point in the night, someone rolled over and stole half the blanket, and you're pretty sure you spent a good hour trying to reclaim it with your foot. But the fire is still alive. The roof is still holding. You're still breathing. So by medieval standards, you're doing fine. The village is quieter than usual. Not hushed exactly, but subdued. Everyone's seen what a collapsed roof looks like now. There's a new kind of silence in the air, like people are thinking louder than they're speaking. After breakfast, more broth now featuring exactly 1 turnip chunk per person, you and your father head to the Martins' place again. Today is reinforcement day. Half the village will help because that's how it works. Someone else's disaster becomes everyone's work. You carry rope, wooden beams, a hammer, with a handle so worn it's practically smooth. The snow crunches beneath your clogs, wet and noisy. Your scarf is still damp from yesterday, and you curse yourself for not drying it better near the fire. But you keep walking. At the Martins' hut, the work has already begun. A group of men are lifting a new support beam, while 2 women knit lengths of cloth to stuff into gaps along the walls. You join the line like it's choreographed. No one gives orders. You just know. You and your father lift a section of timber onto your shoulders and walk it around to the back where the worst of the collapse happened. The snow here is tinged with soot and dirt and a sadness that clings. You plant the new beam, brace it with stones and rope, and move on. The wind cut sharp today. It doesn't scream, just whispers long, slow sighs that snake around your neck. You keep your head down, your hands moving. Later, your fingers will ache, for now they're too numb to care. Midway through the day, someone brings bread. not fresh, but soft enough. You all gather near the half-repaired wall, eating in a huddle, steam rising from mugs of weak ale and stronger tea. You laugh when someone retells the story of your cousin's dramatic reaction to a splinter last year. It's not funny, really, but it keeps the wind out for a few minutes. And that's the thing. You don't laugh because life is funny. You laugh because life isn't. Historians still argue how much humor peasants had time for, if they found joy between the hunger and frostbite, or if the laughter was more survival instinct than true mirth. But here now, surrounded by patched walls and creaking timbers, you know this. The jokes are as real as the hunger, just as sharp, just as necessary. By late afternoon, the roof is patched. Not perfectly, but enough to keep snow off the martins' heads for another week. You rewrap your scarf and start to trudge home, your father beside you, quiet but steady. Neither of you speaks until the hut is back in sight, smoke rising gently from the chimney like a sign of life. Inside, the fire's been fed. Someone added herbs to the pot mint, maybe, or something pretending to be mint. You don't question it. You peel off your outer layer and hang it by the fire. Your mother is weaving something in the corner fingers, quick and sure. Your cousin's tending the baby, who is teething and furious about it. Your brother is attempting to repair his wooden clogs with string and stubbornness. You sit near the hearth and let the heat soak in. Eventually, your grandmother joins you. She hands you a bundle of dried lavender pressed between two scraps of linen. "Tuck it under your pillow," she says. "For sleep?" You nod and take it. Lavender smells like not winter, like something soft. You press it to your face for a moment, then slip it into your bedding buried deep where it won't get trampled. Later, as darkness gathers and the hut fills with the sounds of nighttime, again rustling straw, sleepy murmurs, the goat shifting with a sigh, you prepare for sleep. With the usual routine, rewrap your feet, bank the fire, adjust your scarf, lie down. The charm is still in your pocket. Tonight, your grandmother whispers something extra over the fire, something in a dialect. You don't know a bit of old village language that only comes out on nights when the wind sounds like it's remembering things. No one asks what it means. No one needs to. You close your eyes, and somewhere just beyond the edge of sleep, you feel the warmth of the fire still clinging to your skin, the scent of lavender in the straw, the weight of a charm in your hand. You've made it another day, one ember at a time. The next morning begins not with cold, not with coughing, but with singing. It's faint at first, just a few notes threading through the thatch and sliding beneath the door. A woman's voice warbling somewhere between a lullaby and a hymn. You blink awake momentarily, unsure whether it's real or some dreamy echo stirred by the lavender you tucked into your bedding. Then you sit up and realize it's real. Someone outside is singing in the snow. You glance around. Your mother's already awake, brow furrowed in curiosity. The baby's still asleep, blissfully unaware that someone's decided to host a concert in the middle of winter. You stretch, groaning, as your joints pop like old furniture. Then you crawl to the door and nudge it open just enough to peek outside. There she is, old Greta, wrapped in every shawl she owns, hair like a silver nest beneath her wool cap, standing in the center of the village square with her arms slightly raised and her face tilted toward the sky. Her song isn't polished or even particularly in tune, but it's steady, calm, old. You recognize the words after a while. It's a winter blessing part, folk song part, warning part, whispered plea. Your grandmother used to hum it while hanging herbs to dry. Something about snow melting when it's ready, bones holding fast, and fire walking the long road home. You watch in silence, joined by other sleepy faces at other cracked doorways. No one interrupts her. No one dares. Because today is midwinter day. You'd nearly forgotten. It snuck up this year, buried under snowdrifts and daily survival. But here it is the longest night now behind you. Not warmer yet, not easier, but turning. The sun begins, however reluctantly, its slow crawl back. After Greta finishes her song, she lowers her arms, nods at no one in particular, and shuffles back to her hut. Your cousin mutters, "I thought she'd gone quiet this year." Your mother replies, "Greta never forgets midwinter." And you suppose that's true. Some people mark the seasons with calendars. Greta does it with song. Back inside, the air feels, if not lighter, then at least less heavy. Someone feeds the fire without being asked. The goat lets out a long bleat that sounds almost approving. Even the broth simmers more enthusiastically than usual, as if it too senses a shift. After breakfast, the village gathers near the central well. It's not a celebration. There's no feast, no dancing. But it's a tradition to mark midwinter together. Someone brings a tiny loaf of sweet bread, someone else a skin of warmed cider. You each take a bite, a sip, say a blessing, then move on. A symbolic act. Hope passed around like a bowl. You remember a story your grandmother told last year about how long ago midwinter was celebrated with fire dances and songs that lasted till dawn. About how people believed if the fire was strong on midwinter, spring would come early. If it failed, the cold would cling longer. Historians still argue whether these rituals were widespread or just scattered traditions clinging to isolated communities. But in your village, they're real. Faint now worn by time, but not forgotten. You return to your hut feeling different, not warmer, but steadier. You rewrap the straw in your bedding, fluff it up with a touch of lavender still lingering. You press the charm in your pocket and murmur a midwinter verse beneath your breath, something half remembered, half invented. You bank the fire with a little more care. Add an extra twist of rush for luck. Then you help your father carry snow from the roof. It's dangerous work. You use long poles to shift the weight, careful not to send a pile sliding onto your head. Your brother nearly does just that, earning himself a lecture and a cold lump of snow down his back. You both laugh. It's the first time either of you has done that in a while. The rest of the day is quiet. No visitors, no disasters. You patch a wall. You split a few sticks of semi-dry wood and stack them under the bench to dry. You fix the binding on your cousin's cracked clog, muttering about his habit of walking through puddles like he's daring fate. That night, supper, is a little different. Someone found dried berries hidden in a storage jar, miracle of miracles, and your mother stews them into the broth. The taste is strange, sweet, sharp like summer, trying to speak through frozen ground. You eat it slowly, carefully, gratefully. As the fire winds down, your grandmother clears her throat and begins one final midwinter story. This one's about a girl who carried fire across the mountains to save her village, who climbed barefoot through the snow wrapped in rags with only a coal cupped in her hands and a prayer stitched into her breath. The story ends, as most of them do, not with glory, not with comfort, but with survival. The village lived, the fire endured. That was the triumph. And you get it now. You curl into your bedding, tucking the charm under your chin, the scent of berries still in your mouth, and the song still in your ears. Tonight, you dream not of warmth, but of light returning, one ember at a time. Midwinter has passed, but the cold hasn't. In fact, the next morning brings the kind of freeze that creeps into your teeth. You don't even know how it gets there, but it does, slipping between molars and freezing your thoughts into brittle chunks. You wake up with your face wrapped in wool and your breath trapped in the tiny scarf cave you've created overnight. It's damp as always, but you're grateful for it. The fire is down to ash and smoke, barely clinging to life. You slip from the bed pile, bones protesting, and begin the slow practiced ritual of resuscitation. Peat brick, dried rush, breath like a bargain. You coax the flame back to life like it's a sick bird. It takes longer than usual. You wonder if the fire is as tired as you are. Outside, snow falls in lazy swirls, more decorative than dangerous. You take a moment to look out the shutter crack. The village is dressed in white, quiet as a prayer. You can see footprints from yesterday already softened, as if time itself is trying to erase them. After breakfast, porridge again, only slightly less gray than the sky. You go with your father to check on the Martins. Their hut is holding thanks to everyone's help, but the walls are weeping. Moisture seeps through the cracks where snow melted and refroze, leaving behind veins of ice, and a smell that makes you think of damp fur and rotten thatch. You help patch what you can. Your cousin ties up a sagging beam with rope and mutters that it's like trying to bandage a dying horse. You tell him to be quiet and keep working. On the way back, you pass the communal storehouse. Not the granary that's for grain taxes, lords, and bureaucracy. This is the real storehouse. A shed where people stash odds and ends, dried moss, spare clogs, half-frozen turnips, old rags, firewood, if someone's lucky or generous. It runs on quiet barter and unspoken agreements. Today, it's almost empty. A bundle of reeds, a single cracked pot, one extremely suspicious-looking carrot. You leave 2 strips of dried rush and take a scrap of wool cloth. No one watches. No one needs to. That's how the shed works. It sees, remembers, and forgets all at once. Historians still argue about informal resource sharing among medieval peasants. How much was communal and how much was pure pragmatic survival? You'd argue it's both. You don't give because it's noble. You give because next week it might be you looking at that suspicious carrot and wondering if you can stretch it into soup. Back home, You work on sealing another draft. There's one behind the bedding that's been whispering at your ankles for days. You wedge a brick into the gap and stuff it with moss. It's not elegant, but it holds. Later, you help your sister make a new pair of hand wraps, long strips of cloth meant to go under her gloves. Her fingers are always red and cracked, no matter how many layers she wears. You wrap them for her gently, like she's a book coming undone. She doesn't say thank you. She doesn't have to. The afternoon passes in the rhythm of winter, chop patch wrap, warm. You haul in more firewood damp, but better than nothing. You stir the stew pot. You twist your frozen scarf into a shape that won't choke you in your sleep. And then you find it. Tucked in the corner near the back wall under a pile of unused cloth is a letter. Not a real letter. Most people here can't read more than a prayer. But a folded piece of parchment smudged with charcoal sketches. Someone's drawing. A child's, probably. It shows your hut tiny and bent with smoke curling from the roof and stick figures gathered around the fire. One of them is holding what looks like a spoon. Another has hair like a wild broom. You smile. You don't know who drew it or when, but you keep it. Because sometimes proof that warmth existed is more valuable than warmth itself. That evening, you place the drawing near the hearth tucked behind the water jug. You don't tell anyone, but you know they'll see it. You want them to see it. As night falls, the fire is strong again. The hut feels smaller but safer. The cold still crouches outside, teeth bared, but for now it stays behind the door. You eat your portion of stew, dip your bread in, carefully savoring every drop. You listen to the fire crackle and the baby coo, and the goat chew something it absolutely wasn't supposed to. And when you finally tuck into your straw bedding, the lavender is still faintly sweet. The charm still warms your palm, and the sketch behind the jug watches over the fire. You close your eyes, and in the dark, you whisper something small. We're still here. You're deep in a dream when the shouting starts. Not angry, shouting, urgent shouting, the kind that jerks you out of sleep before your body's ready heart, already racing before your feet touch the floor. You scramble upright, still tangled in straw and scarf, and your first thought is fire. Your second is wool. Your third, more honest, is simply please not today. You shove open the door before your father reaches it. The cold slaps you full in the face, but you barely notice. In the square half, the village is gathered, already cloaked, hooded faces pale in the moonlight. A man is standing in the center, hunched, panting, one hand pressed to his ribs. It's Elias. He works the far field lives on the edge of the forest with his mother and their mule. Between his gasps, he gets the words out, tracks, behind the tree line, big ones, moving toward the village. Everyone knows what that means. Wolves, or something worse. In winter, the lines between legend and real danger blur. Wolves are real, yes, but so are the fears handed down in whispers, tales of hungry things that follow the cold things that walk on four legs until they don't. You and your father glance at each other. No need to speak. He disappears back inside, grabs a torch and the axe he keeps near the firewood pile, You grab your thickest cloak and a long iron poker. You don't expect to fight anything, but you prepare anyway. The village forms a line, not a proper militia, just farmer shepherds, children old enough to hold tools and young enough to still believe they're invincible. You walk the perimeter together, scanning snowdrifts, checking for paw prints. Lantern light bobs and shaky hands. Eventually, you see them. Tracks. Big ones. Too big. They lead up from the frozen stream, cross the edge of the commons, and vanish near Greta's fence. You crouch to trace one with your gloved finger. It's not fresh, maybe a few hours old, but the shape deep, wide, and oddly flat at the heel sends a shiver through you. Your uncle mutters something about forest spirits. Your cousin laughs too loud, too fast. The wind doesn't laugh back. Eventually, someone suggests it's an old trail, that the tracks don't lead to the village, they just pass by. Everyone nods a little too eagerly. Still, no one goes back to bed right away. Back at your hut, the fire is almost out. You revive it with numb fingers. No one says much, but that night, you all sleep closer. Your father keeps the axe near the bed. You leave your boots on, just in case. The next morning, nothing happens. No new tracks, no missing animals, no vanished neighbors. But no one forgets the prints, or the way the wind sounded like breathing in the trees. You go about your chores like always, carry water, patch the roof, stoke the fire, but the silence feels heavier now. Everyone's listening, watching. Even the goat stays unusually quiet. That alone makes you nervous. At lunch, your grandmother tells a story quietly to just you and your sister about a winter long ago when a boy followed strange tracks into the woods and never came back. But then, years later, he returned with silver in his hair and frost in his voice. Said he'd lived under the hill, said he'd learned the cold's true name. Your sister asks what it was. Your grandmother only says we don't speak it aloud. Historians still argue how seriously medieval villagers took tales like that, whether they believed in frost spirit shapeshifters, or the idea that the cold itself could think. Some say it was metaphor. Others believe it was survival instinct. Name your fear, so you can hold it at arm's length. You're not sure where you stand. But that night, you bank the fire carefully. You hang your charm above the door, and when the wind passes by the shutters like a long sigh, you whisper, "Keep walking." Then you sleep, not deeply, not peacefully, but still sleep. Because even when something watches the village from the edge of the trees, you still have work to do in the morning. Goats to feed, water to carry, fires to keep, one ember at a time. The village is different after that night. Not panicked, not paranoid, just attentive. People close doors faster. Fires are kept higher even when peat is low. Children are sent indoors sooner. No one walks alone after sunset. And no one goes near the woods unless it's absolutely necessary. You notice it in the way people move quickly, quietly. Less chatter at the well, fewer jokes during morning chores. Even the goat seems to sense the change, sticking closer to the hut and refusing to investigate its usual mischief corners. Life continues, of course. It always does. The snow still falls, the wind still prowls, the soup still tastes vaguely of disappointment. But now there's a question behind every glance. What else is out there? Your father doesn't talk about the tracks. Not directly. But he checks the door latch 3 times before bed now. He's also started sharpening his knife a little more often. You watch him run the blade along the whetstone with a steady, almost meditative rhythm. Shh, shh, shh. It's not fear exactly, it's readiness. Today, you help your mother mend a tear in the curtain that separates the sleeping area from the cooking space. It's just for privacy, really thin wool, more symbolic than useful. But even symbols matter in winter. You stitch, slowly, fingers stiff, the thread biting into cracked skin. You think they'll come back, your sister asks from her spot on the floor where she's sorting dried herbs into little bundles. You pretend to think longer than you need to, then say no. But if they do, we'll be ready. She nods, but doesn't look up. Her hands move a little faster. That afternoon, you head out to the far field to check on the traps your cousin set weeks ago. You're not expecting anything. It's mostly for show now or hope. But you bring the old sling anyway, just in case a rabbit is dumb enough to loiter near your path. The snow out here is thick and untouched. You walk slowly, eyes scanning the tree line. The air is sharp, the kind that cuts when you breathe too deep. You pull your scarf higher until your mouth disappears. At the traps, you find exactly what you expected: a few snapped branches, some nibbled bait, and one mangled snare with nothing in it. You sigh and kneel to reset the cleanest one. Then you see them. Not tracks, not movement, but marks, strange little symbols scratched into the bark of a tree just beyond the clearing. 3 lines, a curve, a dot. You frown, stand slowly, and walk over. They're not natural, not animal-made, not weather. They were carved deliberately recently. The bark is still peeled fresh at the edges, revealing pale wood beneath. You don't touch them. You just stare. Then, without really thinking, you whisper, "Keep walking," and turn around. You don't run, but you also don't look back. You don't tell anyone, not that night, not yet. You feed the fire. You share your stew. You mend the hole in your sock. You sit near the hearth and listen to your grandmother tell another story, this one about a winter too warm when crops sprouted early and then died in a frost 2 days later. The gods punish hubris, she says, especially in spring. Your father grunts in agreement and adds another brick of peat. Later, as everyone sleeps, you lie awake beneath your blanket, the charm warm in your palm. You picture those marks again, that bark, that curve, and you wonder, are we alone out here, not in the hut, not in the village, but in the world? You drift off with the question still whispering in your thoughts, weaving its way into your dreams. And in those dreams, the fire never dies. Not because it's tended, but because it refuses. The days begin to stretch just barely. You notice it in the way the shadows fall later across the snow and how the sky hesitates before surrendering to night. Not much, but enough. A sliver of time, a breath more light. It should be heartening, but you can't stop thinking about the marks on that tree. You haven't told anyone, not because you're scared of being laughed at, because you're scared someone might recognize them. And what would that mean? So instead, you carry the knowledge like a pebble in your boot. Small, annoying, impossible to ignore. You go through your days as usual. Rewrap your feet, feed the fire, clean out the soot above the hearth with an old birch switch. You patch a sleeve for your cousin and argue with your brother about whether the stew tastes more like burnt cabbage or boiled sock. It's both. But your eyes keep drifting to the woods. One morning, Greta appears at your door. She doesn't knock. She never does. She just appears wrapped in a bundle of mismatched shawls, carrying a bundle of dried twigs and a clay dish. For the fire, she says, handing them over. You nod and reach to take it, but she doesn't let go immediately. Her eyes are sharp, brighter than her years should allow. You saw something she says, not a question. You freeze. She tilts her head like she's listening to the wind say something you can't hear. Don't say it, she murmurs. Not inside. Then she lets go, turns, and vanishes back down the path like a ghost with good posture. You say nothing, but you bank the fire higher that night. You place the twigs carefully in the flame. They crackle with a faint scent pine and something older. Later, when your mother asks where the smoke smells different, you shrug and say Greta brought seasoning wood. She nods unconvinced, but doesn't press. Historians still argue whether figures like Greta were local healers, witches, or just women with enough memory to seem magical. The truth doesn't matter. What matters is that when she speaks, people listen. And now, so do you. The village holds a gathering that evening. Not a feast, there's nothing to spare but a sitting. Everyone brings what they can: dry bread, dried apple slices, a bit of pickled cabbage. Someone sings. Someone tells a joke that's older than the fire pit. Children wrestle in the snow until someone yells and sends them back inside. Your grandmother leads a short chant for the coming thaw. Your father carves a bit more wood for the shared sled. Your sister shows off a doll she made from straw and old buttons. The other children gasp, delighted, and for a while it feels almost normal. You sit near the fire, letting the warmth creep up your legs, and think about those marks. You imagine drawing them in the ash just to see how people react, just to know. But you don't, because something inside you says, not yet. Instead, you help repair the doorframe on the Martins' hut again. A corner gave way in last night's wind. You wedge in a flat stone and help tie it with cord. The children inside shiver less once it's done. That's enough. You walk home with your brother. He talks about summer like it's already here, how he'll swim in the stream, how he'll help fix the mill wheel, how he'll trade goat's milk for cheese with the village downriver. You listen. You nod. You want to believe in that future too. Back at your hut, you slip the straw doll your sister made into your bedding. She gave it to you quietly with no explanation, and you're not about to break the spell by asking. You press it next to the charm in your pocket. They sit there together, two odd little talismans. Neither strong, neither fancy, but still, you lie down and watch the fire, not because you think it'll go out, but because it's the only thing in the room that always tells the truth. You drift off to the sound of wind outside, no longer howling, but whispering like it's running out of things to say. And in your dream you stand at the tree line. The bark is marked. The air is still. And something just beyond the branches waits. The dream lingers longer than usual. You wake with its frost still in your breath, heart thudding, fingers curled into the edge of the blanket like a lifeline. You don't remember every detail, just snow shadows and a sound like something breathing through wood. You stay still, eyes open, watching the fire for a full minute before moving. It's still burning, a thin orange line along the base like a ribbon of resistance. Everyone else is asleep. You shift quietly, roll to your side, and find the charm in your pocket. Still there, still warm from your body heat. You wrap your hand around it and let your breath slow. Outside, the snow continues its endless hush. You pull the blanket up over your mouth and whisper to no one, still here. Morning breaks pale and reluctant. No sun, just more of that endless milk-colored sky. You rise with a soft groan, already counting how many layers you'll need to be functional. You settle on 5, possibly 6. You skip your morning stretch in favor of not freezing your back muscles. At the hearth, your sister's already crouched, feeding a few rushes into the fire. You were twitching again, she says. Dream, you mumble. Bad, you shrug. Weird. She hands you a mug of hot water that smells faintly of onions and something herbaceous. You talk in your sleep, she adds. You look at her. What did I say? She smirks. Nothing useful. Figures. You drink. The day's work is dull, which you're grateful for. Dull means no wolves, no disasters, no urgent roof repair. You help your mother sort dried roots. You chop moss blocks for fuel. You fix the latch on the tool chest. You hold the baby so your cousin can finally wash her hands in lukewarm water. Normal things, mostly. But you notice things too. The way the birds have gone quiet. The way no one talks about the tracks anymore. Not because they've forgotten, because it's easier to pretend they were just big dog prints, or imagination, or winter being cruel in new and creative ways. That evening you find yourself near Greta's again. You didn't plan it. Your feet just took you there. Her door's already open. Of course it is. She's by the fire as always, wrapping dried leaves in linen pouches. You don't speak at first. Just wait. She doesn't look up. You saw the birch, she says. You nod. Didn't mark it, did you? No. Good. They don't like being acknowledged. You shift, suddenly aware that your boots are still snow damp and your fingers are twitching with nerves. What are they? She shrugs. Could be spirits. Could be memories. Could be the woods just reminding us who's in charge. You frown. That's not an answer. It's winter, she says. Nothing gives answers in winter. You stare at her for a long beat. Why me, you finally ask. She looks up at that, her eyes surprisingly gentle. It's not you, child. It's anyone who notices. You let that sit for a moment, then leave. As you walk back, you glance toward the tree line. No movement, no marks, just stillness, but the kind that watches. That night, your sister wraps the straw doll in a scarf and says, "It's cold." You laugh, but later you do the same for your charm. not because you believe it needs warmth, but because you need the ritual. You lie down beside your brother. The fire is strong tonight, the hut full of soft breathing and faint snores. You close your eyes and try not to think about the tree, but of course you do. And when the dream comes, it's different. You're not alone this time. You're holding a coal in your palm, red and pulsing. The snow doesn't melt around you, it just steps back, like it knows better. You walk through the woods. The tree is waiting. The mark is still there. But this time, you place the coal inside it, and the tree exhales. The next morning, something has changed. You can't name it exactly. The snow is still snow. The wind is still sharp. The fire still grumbles like an old man being asked to get up too early, but the air feels thinner, like a tension stretched too tight has finally slackened just a bit. You sit up, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and realize there's no ice on the inside of the shutters. That hasn't happened in weeks. Outside, you hear birds, not many, not loud, but real bird song winding through the pale morning like a hesitant thread of spring. You blink, sit very still, and listen. Your sister hears it too. Did you? You nod. Yeah. She stares at the shutter like it's a miracle. Maybe it is. Breakfast feels different. People move slower not because they're cold, but because they can. The fire's not a desperate scramble today. It's just a fire. And your mother hums as she stirs the pot. Small things, but they matter. Later, you help with the roof again, this time, not in response to disaster, but just regular wear. A few patches of thatch had come loose, and the actual sun, mind you, is strong enough that you can work without losing feeling in your fingers. You laugh when your cousin drops a bundle on your head. It startles the goat so badly it knocks over the kindling basket. Everyone laughs, and for a moment the village doesn't feel like it's bracing for something. It feels like it's breathing. After the work, you walk the path toward the woods. Not all the way, just close enough to see the edge. The birch tree is still there, of course, tall, silent, unmoved, but the mark's gone. The bark has healed over or been covered by snow, or maybe never existed at all. You stand there a long time, the air cold in your lungs, and listen. Nothing moves. Nothing watches. Nothing waits. You leave a small offering at the base of the tree anyway, just a few rushes tied in a knot. Not because you expect anything in return, but because thanks when unspoken becomes superstition, and thanks when spoken becomes strength. You whisper, "That's enough now," and walk away. That evening the hut is warm. Before the fire even really gets going, there's a kind of leftover heat hanging in the air, maybe from the sun, maybe from the laughter earlier, maybe from something older and quieter than both. You sit near the hearth with your sister, helping her rewrap the doll's scarf. She's added a second button eye and braided a piece of straw into a tiny belt. It looks absurd and oddly heroic. "You think we'll get through the rest of winter?" she asks. You look around. Your father sharpening tools, your mother folding dried herbs, your cousin trying to make mittens out of an old bag, the goat snoring in the corner. You nod. Yeah, I think we already are. Historians still argue whether peasant communities mark the end of winter by fixed dates, religious feasts, or just gut feeling, you'd argue all three, but mostly gut. You can feel when something has passed, when a shadow has stopped leaning over your shoulder, when fear loosens its grip, not vanishes, just lets go a little. That night, your grandmother tells no story. She just says, rest, and everyone does. The fire glows steady, the shutters stay quiet. The cold doesn't bite at brushes, and when you sleep, the dream is simple. You're walking through the snow. But this time, you're not cold. When you wake, it's to a soft creak and a warm beam of light slipping through the cracks in the wall. Actual sunlight, not the ghost glow of cloudy skies, not the watery gray that fakes warmth but delivers nothing. This is honest golden light, the kind that lays itself gently across the floorboards and makes the frost sparkle instead of just sting. You lie there for a moment, letting the light kiss your cheeks, eyes half closed. The fire is low, but the room is warm, not from peat, not from moss. From the sun, your breath doesn't fog the air. You blink, sit up, and stretch. Your spine cracks in protest, but your joints ache less. Your scarf is drier. Your blanket doesn't feel like it was pulled from a snowbank. You smile, you step outside, and the world is glistening. Everything's covered in a fragile skin of ice branches, thatch fences, even the goat's horn where she snoozes beside the shed. But beneath the ice, things move. You can hear it. Water dripping from eaves, snow sliding off rooftops, birds trilling somewhere above, giddy from the thaw. Greta is already outside, arms stretched to the sky face tipped back, catching the sun on her closed lids. She looks like a scarecrow receiving benediction. You wave. She doesn't wave back, but she smiles. You and your brother race to the stream after chores. It's still half frozen, but not silent. You hear the trickle beneath the ice like the earth's first whisper after a long sleep. You stomp on the thick patches and watch them crackle outward in spiderwebs. He laughs so hard he nearly falls in. Later, you help your sister clean out the corner of the hut where the straw has grown too soft, too damp. She tosses armfuls into a pile outside where the sun can reach it. The goat tries to eat it. Business as usual. Inside, your mother opens the shutters. The real shutters, not just the rag-stuffed holes, but the actual wooden ones creaky on their leather hinges. Light floods the room. Dust dances in the beams like it's forgotten how to settle. You sit in the patch of sunlight, let it warm your knees, and for the first time in weeks, you don't need the fire. You still feed it, still bank it, still bless it, but you don't rely on it, not completely, and that feels like a kind of freedom. Historians still argue how medieval peasants marked the arrival of spring. Was it Candlemas, the equinox, the first flower, the first unfrozen stream? In your village it's this, the first day you sit by the fire not to survive, but to enjoy it. That evening, you gather in the square not for fear, not for grief, but to mark the turning. Someone brings honey. Someone else has a tiny crust of saved cheese. The children chase each other with snowballs that melt before they can even land. Your grandmother sits on a stool and sings not a warning, not a story, just a song. A soft, wordless hum that curls around the gathering like smoke. Even the wind quiets to listen. The martins bring fresh reeds. The baby giggles in the sunlight. Even the most skeptical among you, your uncle, the one who still sharpens every stick like it's a sword, smiles. You don't say it aloud, but everyone feels it. The worst of it is behind you. There will still be snow, still frost, still hardship, but the grip is loosening, and you endured it, with moss and straw and laughter, with fire and blankets and whispered prayers, with cracked hands and burnt soup, and the memory of a tree marked and now silent. You look at your sister's doll, now missing an eye, but twice as loved. You touch the charm in your pocket soft from weeks of carrying. You glance at the sun as it lowers, not as quickly, not as cruelly. You don't fear the night tonight, because now you remember the warmth. And the fire, it still burns. But now it flickers like a friend, not a guardian, not a god, just a presence. And that's enough. Spring doesn't arrive all at once. It tiptoes in. A warmer breeze one day, the distant babble of a stream no longer strangled by ice. A patch of earth exposed dark and soft smelling like wet roots and possibility. It's not a sudden change. It's a quiet one. The kind you only notice because you've learned to measure life in breaths and embers. You wake before the fire dies, not from cold, but from habit. Old reflexes. You sit up and blink into the dim morning, expecting the bite of winter against your skin. But it's not there. The hut is cool, yes, but not cruel. The fire hasn't sunk into desperation. It smolders politely, like it knows its shift is nearly over. You stretch and rise without layers, without complaint. You stoke the fire with only one peat brick instead of two. And then you do something bold. You open the door. The air outside isn't warm exactly, but it's moving, and it smells like life, like thawing bark and moss and that strange sweetness that floats in the air before anything's actually blooming. You take it in slowly, like it might vanish if you breathe too fast. Your sister joins you. She's barefoot, just for a second, just to feel the mud between her toes. She squeals and hops back inside, laughing. Your mother scolds her while hiding a smile. Even the goat seems optimistic, nudging its way toward the patch of grass reappearing beside the water trough. The snow around the huts has receded enough that footprints now find earth. Real squishy, blessed earth. You look at your hands, still cracked, still rough, but healing. You haven't bled from the cold in days. Your breath no longer ghosts in front of your face. It's not just spring coming. It's you returning to yourself. The village gathers again, not in fear, but in rhythm. There's no feast yet, but someone found wild garlic growing in the woods. Someone else dug up a carrot that somehow survived the freeze. These are not banquets, but they are beginnings. You sit by the hearth that evening with your cousin and help him carve a new spoon. His old one burned at the firewood pile last month. You both laughed about it then. You laugh again now, but this time without the tired edge. Your sister places her doll near the hearth upright, like it's supervising the coals. The charm you carried all winter now hangs above the door, tucked into a little braid of straw and string, a quiet honor. Your grandmother tells one last winter tale, not a warning, not a ghost story, but a memory of a year when the snow came late and stayed too long. Of a village that endured not because it was strong, but because it was stubborn, because people watched each other, kept count, shared fire. You only need one ember, she says. That's always been enough. Historians still argue whether peasant families found meaning in hardship or simply endured without reflection. You'd say sometimes both, but mostly they carried meaning the way you carry a coal to the next hut. Not loudly, just carefully. That night, your brother sleep talks again. Something about goats with hats. You nearly wake him to ask questions, but let it go. You're tired, but not the kind that hollows you out. The kind that means you've done enough. You lie in bed, eyes open, listening to the room breathe. The fire crackles softly, a familiar lullaby. You no longer need it to survive, but you still love it. Outside, the snow melts a little more. The trees hold their breath, and spring, though still distant, is walking your way. Step by step, you close your eyes and dream not of frost, not of fire, not of fear, but of green, of mud on your hands, of bread that doesn't taste like smoke, of laughter outside not huddled in, of life beginning again. The last frost comes and goes without ceremony. You only notice because the morning fire takes longer to light, and not because it's gone out, but because no one rushed to feed it. The urgency is fading. The fear is gone. You wake slower, now stretch longer, linger beside the hearth, not because you must, but because it's pleasant. Even the air inside the hut has changed. The smoke doesn't cling to your clothes as fiercely. The dampness underfoot has turned to cool dryness. You realize slowly that you haven't layered your scarf in days. Your fingers bend without cracking. Your breath doesn't shiver in your throat. You survived winter, not by outrunning it, not by overpowering it, but by staying. Outside the village stirs in color again. Children play in puddles, chasing each other with sticks and bits of old cloth like war banners. Laundry appears on lines flapping mismatched absurd. Someone paints a door frame with blue clay from the river, just because it's pretty. The world hums. You walk with your cousin to the far field past the trees where you once saw something watching. The birch is still there, plain, unmarked, entirely forgettable now in the light. You nod at it anyway out of habit or respect. Maybe both. In the field, the snow has melted into dark furrows. The ground is soft, stubborn, and full of promises it's not quite ready to keep. You press your foot into it anyway, feeling the earth's readiness, its slow inhale. The planting will start soon. The hunger gap will tighten its grip before spring gives anything back. You know all that. But for now, there is light and birds and mud. You head back with a bundle of dry reeds under your arm and dirt in your cuffs. Your sister greets you at the door with a grin and a truly horrifying lump of bread dough. It might be food, she says. No promises. You laugh, loud, freely. The goat sneezes behind her. You both pretend it's an omen of good luck. Inside, your mother has started sweeping more often, not just for cleanliness, but because she can. The ash piles have shrunk, the bedding has been shaken out, the moss pads replaced. The hut feels lived in, not clung to. Your father opens both shutters before dusk. The light pours in like it owns the place. You don't stop it. The fire, now smaller, flickers calmly. It doesn't roar anymore, it purrs. Your grandmother doesn't tell a story tonight. Instead, she hums while peeling onions. And when you all sit down to eat real food, not just broth and prayers, it feels like a feast. Because it is. Later that night, as you lie beneath your blanket, you reach for the charm one last time. You hold it in your palm and remember all the nights it warmed your hand while the cold pressed in from the edges of the world. You whisper, "Thank you." Then you hang it on the wall beside your sister's straw doll. The fire is low. The hut is quiet. You're not watching the shadows anymore. You're watching the future, still faint, still fragile, but walking toward you with every melting patch of snow. You shift on the straw, close your eyes, and breathe in deeply. The scent of earth, of warm wood, of something new. And just before sleep takes you, you hear the soft drip of thawing ice from the eaves, each one a metronome counting you into spring. You smile into the dark because you remember now. You remember how winter held you close but never won. You remember how the fire fought. You remember that a single ember was all it ever took. And now you are the warmth. And so, little by little, the cold fades. The snow pulls back, revealing the dark, fertile world it had hidden beneath its silence. The fires you once fed with trembling hands now burn quietly, no longer lifelines, just companions. The wind that once screamed through the cracks now whispers at the windows with nothing urgent to say. Your hut stands where it always did, humble, patched, and full of life. And you're still here. There is no applause for surviving winter, no trumpets, no declarations, just breath in your lungs, mud on your boots, laughter returning to your throat like it had only wandered off for a while. You'll plant seeds soon, chase goats again, fetch water with lighter steps, but tonight, let your body rest. You've earned stillness. Let the last bits of frost melt from your bones. Let the fire soften to a low hush, just enough to glow across the walls. The worst is behind you. Spring is waiting. And sleep, gentle, quiet sleep, is already wrapping you in something warmer than wool. Close your eyes now. Let your breath slow. You're safe. You're warm. You're home.